So, a while back, at least a couple of years ago, I had what I refer to as an internet bum fight with Dyer. Supposedly a debate, but it quickly devolved because Jay doesn't actually know how to debate. So, um, I mean, he was actually destroyed. His position was destroyed, but his followers, zombified, lobotomized people that believe or listen to Jay Dyer, just assumed that he won because he kept saying, "You don't know who Denzinger was," which is, of course, a lie, but never mind. Now, someone very kindly sent me the whole video of the debate because it had gone offline. I don't know if taken down by Ralph, the guy who originally did it, or by Jay Dyer. I don't know. Anyway, it wasn't available anymore online, and somebody sent it to me. And I thought, okay, since most people don't read, so they didn't bother to read my after action report of the whole thing because I knew that this debate was gonna descend into just like, oh, I won because I said this. Oh no, it's just retarded. I said before the debate, I'm gonna do a write up afterwards to just prove the fact that Jay is either lying, doesn't know what he's talking about, or is in any case wrong. Which I did. It's about 9,000 words, so most people won't read it. And since, the new generations don't really know how to read, they just look at videos, I thought, okay, well, I've got the video now, and I'll take it apart bit by bit on video. And I'll try and make it a little bit more entertaining than the original, because Jay is a pretty dry guy. I mean, there's a reason that his little nickname is VJ Dryer. But anyway, I'll try and stick to the point, but make it a little bit more interesting than just dry theology. And you can always verify the things that I'm saying by going to the blog post, which is linked below, and just checking in writing, so that you can double check that what I'm saying is true and it's not just in a video or just a soundbite. You can actually check it out and write. So that's that. And without further ado, let's look at the original debate in which I'll interspace my little video comments. I quite like this format with sort of a light behind me, as though I am pontificating the truth to people like Jay Dyer, which need it desperately. Without further ado, here I go.
We'll start off with Jay Dyer's presentation. It's slated 12-minute limit. Then Kurgan will have a critique for 8 minutes. Then Kurgan will have a presentation for 12 minutes, and then Jay Dyer will have a critique for 8 minutes. Now, originally those were supposed to be 15. I shaved them down to 12 because I just felt like 15 was a little too much. I think 12 will be fine. So it's going to be more of a point-counterpoint type of program today. So that's how we're doing it. Let me go ahead and join it and go ahead and get this thing started. I just explained that to the audience. But before we do get into the debate, Kurgan, you've never been on the program, and I'm also going to let Jay speak too. But why don't you introduce yourself real quick before we start, Kurgan?
Oh, okay. Well, very briefly, the name Kurgan was given to me by a bunch of people that sort of hang out on Vox Day's blog, and they got the name the Dread Ilk by sort of people who don't agree with Vox, and I hung out with them and we talked, and they named me that apparently because of my friendly attitude, I guess, after the bad guy in Highlander. And that's basically it. I became a Catholic only about 2 years ago, and I pretty much lived very much outside of the church for most of my life before that. And I sort of researched Christianity and everything for about 4 years before I got baptized, which was the result of a sort of road to Damascus moment. That's about it. I mean, if you want to know more, just ask me.
No, that's fine. Yeah, just a little brief, because for people who don't know you. Now, Jay Dyer, you've been on the program before several times, actually, in high-profile visits. But, I gave him that opportunity, so if you want to add something yourself, go ahead.
Yeah, just let me change hats real quick here over to the shark hat. That's my debate hat.
Is that a Greg Norman? Is that Norman's logo, I think? Yeah, go ahead.
This is my shark debate hat. All right, so yeah, I do jaysanalysis.com. I've done that for about 11 years, roughly. I'm the author of 2 books on Hollywood, film, and symbolism. I'm the creator of the TV show Hollywood Decoded. I have 2 books coming out this year on Orthodox theology and apologetics. I was in Roman Catholicism for about 8, 9, 10 years, somewhere in there. I was in the circles of sedevacantism, so I think that I'm going to be more than able to debate this topic. So glad to be here. Thanks, Ralph.
Oh, you're very welcome. Like I said, it is a little bit. I did have some people on Twitter be like, "What? What are you guys talking about?" Well, that's why we're here, and to educate some people and get some hopefully some good arguments going. Now, it's my understanding that you're slotted for the opening presentation, Jay. So I'll just throw it over to you, sir.
All right. Well, yeah. So, like I said, I'm familiar with these movements. I was involved in these movements for many years throughout the 2000s. To begin my rebuttal to his videos, I think that's where I'm going to start. I know that we agreed to discuss specifically the topic of the vacancy of the Apostolic See. But in his videos, he made a basic blunder, which was that I made up a quote about martyrs outside of the Catholic Church not existing. And he faulted me for citing unum sanctum. In fact, I cited unum sanctum and Cantate Domino. Cantate Domino is Denzinger 714. If you're familiar with Denzinger, it's this big fat book of Catholic dogmas. So Denzinger 714 is actually referencing an older statement in Denzinger, Denzinger 246 and 247. Denzinger 247 is under Pope Pelagius II, and it states that there are no martyrs outside of the Catholic Church, that you cannot attain to the rewards of the church. So if anybody wants to, they can pull up patristica.net and they can look up Denzinger, and they will see Denzinger specifically says in 247 that there are no martyrs outside of the Catholic Church.
Right. So he says that there are no martyrs outside of the Catholic Church according to Denzinger, which is fine, because I've got no problem with that, in that as long as you understand what outside of the Catholic Church means, because there are different forums of the Catholic Church. There is the internal and the external forum. The external forum is what people outside, priests, bishops, and so on, can judge you to be or not be inside or outside of the Catholic Church. And there are rules and regulations to decide whether you are a heretic or not, and so on. And as far as the external forum, there are rules to decide whether you're in or out of the Catholic Church. And those that are deemed to be outside of the Catholic Church are not martyrs of the Catholic Church. However, in the Catholic Church, it is accepted that the internal forum is very difficult for anybody to know other than God. And the Catholic Church does allow for martyrs that have been considered to have been baptized by baptism of desire or baptism of blood. And I'll get into that later on. So, while it is correct to say that there are no martyrs outside of the Catholic Church, you first need to understand what does outside of the Catholic Church mean. For example, you could be an Amazonian, lost tribe that has never even heard of Jesus or anything like that. But the Catholic Church accepts that if you have never even heard of Jesus, have never had an opportunity to be baptized and so on, you would be judged according to your conscience. So somebody that is acted correctly throughout their life and perhaps even died in sacrifice to a higher order of things, for example, maybe martyred himself defending his children or something like that, or his people and so on, that would be considered a martyr. And they would be considered to be inside the Catholic Church, because the Catholic Church is not about, God is not a lawyer. Sorry, you didn't tick in that form, you didn't get your baptism certificate, so you're going to hell, even though you did everything right. No, that's not how the Catholic Church operates. So if you understand what inside and outside of the Catholic Church means, then fine, that statement is correct. But that's not what I was arguing. So
now, he didn't pay attention to my video because my video was actually directed at a specific group of sedevacantists online, who are the largest online group of sedevacantists.
No, the Fenites are not the largest online group of sedevacantists. The largest group of sedevacantists are probably those that either follow, unfortunately, Bishop Sanborn in America or the IMBC in Europe. The Fenites, whose leader, if you like, seems to be this Peter Diment, is not really recognized as being correct because he doesn't recognize any valid priests or bishops that are sedevacantists because he doesn't believe in baptism of desire or of blood, and he is wrong about this. I wrote to him about it, and I think I'm one of the only people he has never replied to. He is just wrong about baptism of desire and baptism of blood. So that's that. Now, Jay has got a bone to pick with Peter Diment because Peter Diment has taken Jay apart in several videos demonstrating that Jay is, kind of dishonest and not really any kind of Christian. So he's a bit upset about that, and that's what his original video was about. But in his original video, I don't believe that he pointed this out. He just said sedevacantists in general. So I'm a sedevacantist, and I just thought, no, Jay, I'm going to educate you now. And yeah, he got upset again. Oh, well.
The whole book that I was covering in that lecture was by John Pontrello, who used to be in this group. So John wrote that book while leaving this group. This group believes that there is no baptism of desire. So he should have paid attention to the full talk, and he would have realized that I wasn't just citing unum sanctum, which talks about the necessity of being in union with the Roman bishop. I was actually citing unum sanctum and cantate domino in unison together. Now, if he wants to disagree with that group, that's fine. He can disagree all he wants to with that group, but that's what my video was directed against. It was a response to a 2-hour smear video that was done by one of the largest sedevacantist groups online. So,
okay, and he sort of owns up to that. So far we got no disagreement. We both agree that baptism of desire and of blood are okay, and therefore, if you agree with baptism of desire and blood being okay, well, then you don't really have an issue with, potentially there being possibly some martyrs that are from an external forum may look like they're outside of the Catholic Church, but in fact are within it because of their internal forum, which really only God can judge.
That is what I wanted to initially address. That was his basic first mistake and blunder. A couple other mistakes I will address that he made really quickly, which was that he said that I said that there are no sedevacantist chapels, that it doesn't have an actual existing structure. What I said is that in substance, this is an online movement. Are there sedevacantist chapels? Absolutely. I've been to them. I attended masses that existed in Hampton Inns when I was in the circles of sedevacantism. So I'm aware that there are chapels. My point was that the link that he gave underneath his video was to 100 or so chapels throughout the world who are a bunch of disparate groups who all disagree amongst themselves on basic doctrines such as sedevacantism versus sedepravationism, baptism of desire versus Fenianism. My video was against Fenianism, so he attacked a position that is irrelevant to what I'm actually arguing. He set up a straw man. I'm arguing specifically against this whole crew of people in this movement, that they don't have a coherent position based on what Vatican I, Satis Cognitum, Mystici Corporis, and canon law, the old code of canon law, say about what the Roman bishop and his essential constituent properties are of the Roman See, right? So the Roman See has specific essential constituent properties, which I covered in my video, that will endure until the return of Christ, until the end of time, as Vatican I says. These are dogmas that you have to hold to. So we're going to address some of these here in a second, but I want to point out that the Constitution on the Church of Vatican I, which is Pastor Eternus of Pius IX, this is Denzinger 1821 through 1824.
So we'll just ignore some of that stuff anyway. It's not really relevant. But notice what Jay tends to do. He's talking about Vatican I, which we have the documents of Vatican I. And then he goes on to quote Denzinger again. So, again, it doesn't really matter because, as I've said later in this video as well, you'll see, it doesn't matter what's in Denzinger. It doesn't matter what's in Ludwig. It doesn't matter what's in Thomas Aquinas or St. Augustine's works. It doesn't matter because the way that you know how to behave or what to do or what not to do, how you apply Catholic dogma, is through canon law. And later in this video, quite a bit later, you will see that J. Dyer has to admit that, and there's a split second where he looks like a deer in headlights because he's realized that my point is you can read all these books about Catholic theology and theologians and doctors of the church. Great, it's all, deepening your learning process, I suppose. But it really doesn't matter because the last word of how to behave and what to do or not to do is in Catholic canon law, which is the Code of Canon Law of 1917. And that's my point.
These list certain properties that are, again, essential constituent properties of the Roman See. I'm going to put them up here for you. The first is Peter himself. Peter presides in his successors by direct institution of our Lord in perpetuity to the end of the world. So Peter himself is the beginning and foundation of the Roman pontiff and the Roman See. Point 2 is the primacy. Peter possesses primacy over all bishops, and that includes universal jurisdiction, that includes disciplinary decisions, that includes extraordinary magisterium, and that includes everything that's ordinary magisterium as well that's universal. Vatican I makes it very clear that ordinary universal magisterium also must be accepted. Point 3 is that the Roman See also includes the Roman Curia. Now, I imagine the opponent is going to try to cite the older Code of Canon Law because he thinks that the new Code of Canon Law has fake canons that are added to it.
No, Jay, no. And here we see how he is a liar, because I don't believe he's so stupid as not to know this, given that he supposedly read all this stuff, right? So he's saying that I have a presupposing position that the Code of Canon Law of 1917 is the correct one. No, I don't have a presupposing position. The point is, the Catholic Church is on a line, on a timeline, right? Starts off year zero and goes all the way to the present day. And guess what? In 1917, the Code of Canon Law, which means that all the codes of all the rules of the Catholic Church were put into one book. The Code of Canon Law, the Pio-Benedictine Code of Canon Law of 1917. Which means that in 1917 on, that Code of Canon Law was the beginning and end of all canon law, because it compiled literally tens of thousands of documents over a span of 2,000 years into one book that told you what all the rules are and where they come from and so on. So in that book, it clearly states how you should behave and how you should recognize or not recognize when somebody is a public notorious heretic, and when they are, nobody needs to say anything. They're just known as a public notorious heretic, which means not a Catholic, which means not a Catholic in any way. And they certainly cannot hold any kind of office within the Catholic Church, be it priest, bishop, or pope. So it's very simple. I am not presupposing anything. I am simply following the rules of the Catholic Church. And the rules of the Catholic Church, according to Canon Law of 1917, tell me that from Roncalli on, all the so-called popes were fake popes. And furthermore, all the clergy that continue to promulgate, promote, and teach Vatican II as though it was not heresy also become public notorious heretics and therefore are not Catholics. Now, who created the Code of 1983? These non-Catholic, often not even ordained correctly by the old rite, people. So it would be like saying, oh, well, a bunch of Zulus that have never even heard of Jesus Christ will suddenly create a code of canon law and now all Catholics must stick to it. No. The original Code of Canon Law simply tells you that these people are no longer Catholics. They're outside of the church. They're not valid clergy. So whatever they say, whatever codes they come up with is irrelevant. They're simply not Catholic. There is no presupposition here. I am simply following the magisterium of the church, which tells me that that's how I should behave. And that tells any Catholic that's how they should behave. So any actual Catholic will simply have the sedevacantist position. And anybody else, either because of ignorance or because they're fooled into it or because they're knowing deceivers, will pretend that Vatican II is not heretic. Vatican II is composed of 16 documents that have absolute heresy. In 15 of the documents, direct heresy. There's only one document that doesn't have direct heresy, and that's Inter Mirifica. And that document states that you should promulgate the other 15 documents in every way possible by all technologies available now and in the future. So while it is not directly heretic, it is saying that you should promote absolute heresy in every way possible. So not exactly, what you'd call Catholic. So that's simply what it is. The code of canon law of 1983 is absolute trash. It's nonsense. Apart from the fact that it is completely fake, made by non-Catholics in order to try and destroy the code of canon law of 1917, it is also internally inconsistent. If you actually bother to read that trashy document, which I wouldn't waste your time doing that, maybe you can use it as toilet paper, but that's about it. It is actually internally inconsistent. It contradicts itself. So it's not even, by secular standards, it's not even valid or good. Never mind by Catholic standards. So again, Jay knows this, and I believe he does know this, and I think he's just being disingenuous when he's saying this.
Which actually just presupposes his position that his Seda version of Catholicism is true. Well, he hasn't actually demonstrated that yet. Maybe he will.
It's not my version of Catholicism, and I don't have to demonstrate anything. It is Catholicism. It has a clear thread that follows from the year 0 to 1917. The Code of Canon Law of 1917 was valid. Therefore, every Catholic would have followed the Code of Canon Law of 1917, and that tells us that all those other fake popes and priests and bishops are fake popes, priests, and bishops. So there's no presupposition here. That's just the law. That's what the law tells us. So again, that's not me demonstrating anything. The infallible magisterium of the Church, as embodied in the Code of Canon Law of 1917, which absolutely embodies the magisterium of the Church as it did in 1917 and as it will continue to do in perpetuity forever, tells us that that's what we should do. So that's what I'm doing as a Catholic.
But it doesn't matter whether we pick the new Code of Canon Law in 1983 or the 1917 Code of Canon Law, because
actually, yes, it does matter, because one is a valid code of canon law, the other one is trash made by Freemasons and Satanists. So, yeah, it does make a difference, Jay. I know it doesn't to you, since you are a lying heretic, but, to actual Catholics, it makes a difference.
the Code of Canon Law in 1917, in 149.
Well, Jay has got his little shark hat. I've got my red glasses of canon law destruction. Canon 149. Those elected, postulated, presented, or appointed by anyone to ecclesiastical office are not to be confirmed, admitted, or instituted by a superior below the Roman pontiff until they are evaluated as suitable by their own ordinary, even by examination if it is required by law or by reason of the office, or if the ordinary deems it opportune. So Canon 149 simply says that whoever gets appointed to any office it is really under the dominion, if you like, of the Pope, which of course has to be a valid Pope. So it doesn't actually have anything to do with Canon 188 Part 4, which we'll get to. But let's carry on and look at all the numbers of the canon laws that Jay will mention, and we'll go through every single one. This is also done in writing on the blog post, which is linked below, so you can verify it for yourself.
In 218.
Canon 218. It's actually the first canon on Title 7, Chapter 1, on the Roman Pontiff. The Roman Pontiff, the successor in primacy to Blessed Peter, has not only a primacy of honor, but supreme and full power of jurisdiction over the universal Church, both in those things that pertain to faith and morals, and in those things that affect the discipline and government of the Church, spread throughout the whole world. Part 2. This power is truly episcopal, ordinary, and immediate, both over each and every church, and over each and every pastor, and faithful, independent from any human authority. Okay, I've got no issue with that.
In 154 through 160.
154 through 160, let's read them. 154. Offices that encompass the care of souls, either in the external forum or the internal, cannot be validly conferred on clerics who are not initiated into priesthood. That's really just saying that really only priests can be priests. 155. The provision of an office to which no term is prescribed by special law shall not be deferred beyond 6 months available time from the receipt of notice of the vacancy, with due regard for Canon 458. Again, in other words, that's just saying when you get given an office, you've got to fill it within 6 months, with the exceptions that are in Canon 458, and we can go and read that if you want. But again, it's not really relevant to anything to do with sedevacantism. These are just rules of the church, which I've got no issue with it. Canon 156. Two incompatible offices cannot be conferred on anyone. That's part 1. Again, pretty standard and obvious. 2. Those offices are incompatible that cannot be fulfilled by the same person at the same time. Again, pretty simple logical stuff. 3. With due regard for the prescriptions of Canon 188, Part 3, the grant of a second office made by the Apostolic See is invalid unless in the position document mention of the first incompatible office is made or a derogatory clause is attached. We can go and look at that because it's Canon 188, Part 3, refers to Canon 88 as a whole, says any office becomes vacant upon the fact and without any declaration by tacit resignation recognized by law itself if a cleric, and Part 3 says, accepts another ecclesiastical office incompatible with the prior and has obtained peaceful possession of the other office. So again, this is just saying you can't have two offices that conflict with each other. Again, just simple basic stuff. Canon 157, an office vacant by resignation or by sentence or privation from an ordinary who accepted the resignation or who issued the sentence cannot validly be conferred on his or the resigning one's familiars or blood relatives or fines up to the 2nd degree inclusive. So if you got kicked out of an office or you resign from an office, that office cannot be filled by anybody that was related to you by bloodline up to the 2nd degree inclusive. And this was essentially done because in the old days, like the Borgia days, they used to fill offices with their brothers and sisters and cousins and nephews and so on. So that's all that's about. Again, nothing to do with sedevacantism per se. Canon 158. Whoever, whilst applying for another's negligence or inability, confers an office, acquires no power thereby over the one appointed. Instead, the juridic status thus constituted is the same as if the previous had been made according to the regular norm of law. In other words, just because you put a guy in an office doesn't mean that you have any hold over him other than what the law itself states. Again, pretty simple stuff to make sure you don't, corrupt and defraud the thing. Canon 159, the provisions of any office is to be done in writing to avoid pretending that, oh, this guy said and then he dropped dead, but And now we move on to Article 2 on election. Canon 160 says the election of the Roman Pontiff is guided solely by the constitution of Pope Pius X, vacante sede apostolica of 25 December 1904. In other ecclesiastical elections, the prescriptions of the canons that follow are to be observed, as well as those special ones, if there are any, that are established for individual offices. This is sort of relevant, and it is quite complicated because the Constitution of Pope Pius X, vacante sede apostolica of 25th December 1904, is really only available in Latin, and I have discussed this in some length in the blog post, so probably best you go there. But again, all that's saying is that there are certain rules to follow when you elect a pope, which is fine. The rules weren't followed with Roncalli, and even if they were, it doesn't matter because he was a public notorious heretic for approving one of the two documents that he approved before he died for Vatican II, one of which had direct heresy. So he is at the very least, even if you ignore the fact that he was a Freemason and that he wasn't elected twice at the conclave, other than by blackmail, which makes it invalid, even if you ignore all that stuff, Roncalli was an anti-pope posthumously, as most anti-popes before him were declared anti-popes posthumously. Canon 161. If a college has the right of electing to a vacant office, the election, unless established otherwise by law, is not to be deferred beyond 3 available months calculated from having notice of the vacant office. If this time runs without action, the ecclesiastical superior who has the right of conferring the election or providing successively for it can provide for the vacant office freely. In other words, if you don't fill an office within the 3 months as stipulated, then the guy who's got the authority over it can put pretty much whoever he wants in it. Again, you still have those other rules, right? You can't put in somebody that's like your cousin or whatever. Canon 162 was composed of 5 parts. Part 1. With due regard for particular constitutions or customs, the president of the college, having determined the manner, place, and time convenient for the elections, shall convoke all of the colleges. This convocation, when it must be personal, is valid if it is done either in the place of the domicile or quasi-domicile of the elector, or in the place of actual presence. 2. If one of those to be called was neglected and therefore was absent, the election is valid, but upon his request, his omission and absence being proven, the election must be invalidated by the competent superior, even following confirmation, provided it is juridically shown that within the 3 days of having notice of the election, the objection was transmitted. Again, this is just rules of, when you call the people to make a vote, how it should be done, what the timeline is. If a guy wasn't there and he can prove that he wasn't there for reasons sort of that, didn't have anything to do with him, and he objects within the 3 days, he can then say, no, we've got to call this election again because I need to vote in it too. 3. But if more than 1/3 of the electors are neglected, the election is null by law. In other words, you have to have at least 2/3 of the people there, and the other third of the guys must basically just ignore it and be okay with it, because if they complain, then you have to invalidate it. A defect of convocation does not bar validity if the ones overlooked nevertheless were there. So, just because you call the guys up to the thing and they didn't vote, doesn't mean that the vote is invalid as long as they were there. In other words, you kind of call them, they turn up, but they don't vote, and then they're going to try and claim that, oh, they weren't there or they didn't get called. Well, that's nonsense because they were there. So again, it's very logical stuff, but it's trying to close off any little loopholes. Part 5, if it concerns election to an office that the elected one will hold for life, a convocation of electors before the vacancy of the office has no juridic effect. In other words, you can't vote somebody in before the office is vacated. Canon 163, a convocation having legitimately been done, the right of electing belongs to those who are present on the established convocation day, excluding the faculty of casting a vote, not only by letter but also by procurator, unless special law provides otherwise. Again, just another rule of how the vote is or is not valid. Canon 164, even though one has the right of casting several votes from multiple titles in his own name, he can cast only one ballot. So yeah, none of these things really have anything to do with sedevacantism, with a possible exception of Canon 160, which, as I said, is a bit complicated, so I've written that in more detail in the blog post, so go and look at that. Let's see what else he's got.
In
233, Part 1. Cardinals are created and published by the Roman Pontiff in a consistory, and those so created and published obtain the right of electing the Roman Pontiff and the privileges described in Canon 239. Part 2. If, however, the Roman Pontiff announces the creation of some cardinal in consistory, but keeps his name reserved in his heart, one so promoted in the meantime enjoys no rights or privileges of a cardinal, but when the Roman Pontiff later makes his name known, he enjoys those from the date of publication, but with right of precedence from the time of the reservation in the heart. Okay.
Through 241.
241. During the vacancy of the Apostolic See, the Sacred College of Cardinals and Roman Curia have no power beyond that which is defined in the Constitution of Pope Pius X, Vacantis Sede Apostolica of 25th December 1904. Now this is quite important because it means when you have an interregnum, you are ruled by that Constitution of Pius X. And no bishops, no one really actually has any power or jurisdiction over the remainder of the Catholic Church. That's quite an important point, which does sort of have something to do with sedevacantism, in that we are in a very long interregnum that has gone on for over 60 years. So that's sort of relevant, but not necessarily into what Jay is going to be talking about it, but let's just carry on.
In 162 and 164.
So we have already looked at 162 and 63 and 64 before. Nothing there.
And 180 on.
180 on? What, every single canon after 180? I don't think so, Jay. But anyway, let's just read the canon 180 just to make everybody happy. Canon 180, Part 1. In order that the postulation have force, it must have the majority of the votes. Moreover, if it coincides with election, at least 2/3 are required. Part 2. A vote for postulation must be expressed by the words "I postulate" or its equivalent. A formula "I vote for" or "postulate" or its equivalent is valid for election if an impediment does not exist. Otherwise, it suffices for postulation. Again, nothing to do, this is to do with postulation, which, if you don't really know what that is, well, I can read Canon 179 if that helps. If an impediment bars the election of one whom the electors think is and prefer as the more suitable, and it is possible and useful for this impediment to be dispensed, they can cast their vote for him unless otherwise provided by law, and postulate him to be the competent superior, even if it concerns an office for which the elected one requires no confirmation. Part 2. The compromisers cannot postulate a candidate unless they are expressly authorized to do so in the mandate. So postulation means even if a guy wasn't really being considered for an office, you can sort of say, well, actually, this guy's a better fit than the other guy that most people would vote for. That's all that was. So, but let's say what Jay says, that all these canons that we've just read, what they're supposedly saying according to J. Dyer.
All specify the exact same points, that the Roman Curia, the Holy See, consists of the Roman congregations, the Roman Curia, all of the holy offices that are there, basically the holy office, the Congregation of Doctrine of Faith, etc. All of those offices, when they are signed onto by the Pope, are part of the Holy See, the Apostolic See.
Do you see what I mean? I mean, we've just gone through literally every single one. Okay, it's reversed there because I got but this is the Code of Canon Law 1917. We've read literally every one of the codes that he mentioned. None of them say what he just said. But I don't particularly have a problem with saying that, the various offices of the Vatican form the Curia of the Vatican, and that the Holy See is represented by the Pope at its head, and of course all the other cardinals, whatever. I don't really have an issue with that. I don't know why he's making a point of it to pretend that I do. It's a bit of a straw man, and as you saw, none of the codes that he mentioned really have anything to do with much of anything of his so-called argument.
This is what the sedevacantists don't understand and why they are wrong. You do have to accept the disciplinary measures of the Roman See. The Roman See includes the Curia and the congregations. And then finally, the Roman living pontiff, which Vatican I says will exist in perpetuity to the end of the world. The Roman pontiff exists as the source of the four marks of the church: one, holy, Catholic, and apostolic. He is the source of unity. He is the source of how the church remains universal and Catholic. He is the source of apostolicity, because you only have jurisdiction and licit rights to celebrate the sacraments in unity with the Holy Roman See.
So, a couple of nonsensical positions that he said there. The last one, the most recent one, being that he's saying that you can only perform the sacraments in conjunction with the Holy See, which he's trying to say is not just the Pope, but all the other curia that are in the Vatican. Well, that is nonsense, because during an interregnum, any priest and any bishop has the right to perform the sacraments. What they don't have is jurisdiction. Now, he's right when he says that the Pope has ultimate authority and jurisdiction over the whole church, and that is correct. When a Pope dies, before another Pope is elected, the bishops and the priests and so on do not have jurisdictional authority. In other words, they can still perform the sacraments, but that's pretty much sort of it. And if other bishops or priests or so on are ordained while there is no living Pope sitting on the throne, or valid Pope sitting on the throne, those bishoprics, or those bishops or priests, are deemed to be valid. So there is a positive affirmation that they are deemed to be valid until such a time as a valid Pope is elected and or occupies the seat, in which case he can sort of say, oh no, that guy is not valid for whatever reason. But most popes never bother to, when they take office, to sort of go, all right, every single one of you guys that was like voted bishop while I wasn't yet on my seat, yeah, we're gonna just say no to all of you. It's not necessarily even acknowledged, because it is assumed that somebody who gets validly ordained as a priest or a bishop, even when there is no pope sitting on the throne, is deemed to be validly ordained, unless when the pope does turn up, he says otherwise. So he has to specifically state in the negative that this guy is not valid for it not to be valid. So that's about really the only thing here that's relevant. With regards to Jay saying that, oh, you have to follow the magisterium of the church, you have to follow the priests and bishops and so on. Well, yeah, as any Catholic, you would follow any valid, what a valid bishop or priest or so on says. You generally tend to follow them. Now, of course, a valid bishop or priest can be in error. A perfect example is Bishop Sanborn. I've written about it on my blog. He is in error on several things, and he's not actually even following canon law. So, and he has been told this. So now he's starting to skirt the dangerous area of possibly being starting to, promote heresy to a certain extent. But regardless, that's by the by. The point is that Jay here seems to be saying that you have to absolutely follow what any old priest of the Catholic Church says. In theory, yeah, sure, as long as he's a valid priest and he's not committing errors. But human beings are flawed and whatever. Ultimately, the one sort of jurisdictional authority of the Catholic Church is the Pope. Currently, there is no valid Pope, so there is currently no real jurisdictional authority. The only obviously valid priests and bishops, sedevacantist priests and bishops, still teach the gospel, and they can perform valid sacraments, unlike what Jay said. So again, I don't, he's trying to make a straw man that doesn't really exist. I don't even really see what his point here is, other than trying to create the straw man which has no legs to stand on.
All of those things are absolutely necessary. So what is the essence of the church in the Roman Catholic dogma? The church is indefectible. Okay. The church is in perpetuity, right? The church is public and it is visible. It has a Petrine office that makes it public and visible.
Once again, the conflation is quite astonishing. Yes, I agree with those points that he made, except the last one. It has a Petrine office that makes it public and visible. No, the Petrine office is the head of the church when it's there. And guess what? There's been over 260 times when there was no Petrine office because there was no living pope. They were dead. So, the church is visible as long as it exists and it can be found by those who seek it. In the year 200 or so, when the Christians were hiding in the catacombs to perform the Mass, they weren't exactly all over the internet as they are today. Today, anyone who bothers to try and find out what is the actual position of the Catholic Church can find out about sedevacantism in about 3 minutes flat by using the internet. So we're far more visible now than we ever were in the first 500, 600, 700 years of the Church. And the Petrine office, while it is the head of the Church, when it exists, or when there is an actual pope or valid pope or a living pope in the seat of Peter, is a very important office, certainly, but it is not necessary for the church to exist. Otherwise, it would have ended as soon as Peter died. It is supposed to be there in perpetuity, but again, Jay, invest in a dictionary. I've got a really big one over there, 13 volumes. Go and look up perpetuity. Perpetuity means that it continues on in time. It doesn't mean that it is an unbroken line. And there is absolutely no rule, no law, no canon at all that says how long an interregnum can last. An interregnum is Latin for between realms, between kingdoms. Between when one pope dies and another pope is elected is an interregnum. There is absolutely no limit on how long that can be anywhere in Catholic dogma. And it has lasted for years in the past, before the current era. Now, it is true that the current era of some 60 plus years is a very long interregnum. It's a very long time to have no valid pope on the seat of Peter. That is the longest. However, we've had times of more than that, of 70 years, where there was up to 3 popes. So clearly, at least 2 of them were invalid and fake. And it was much more difficult then to figure out which one was the valid one. So there have been periods in the church where this sort of thing, sort of similarities have happened. And it's not a big deal. Why? Because we've got rules for it. We know how to behave when you're not sure which one of the real popes is really the pope. Or how do you know if a pope actually is a pope? Well, if he's a public notorious heretic, which every single fake pope since Roncalli on has been, therefore we have not had a valid pope since the 9th of October of 1958, when the last valid pope, Pope Pius XII, died. From then till today, we do not have a valid pope yet. So it's a very long interregnum. But that's all it is. It's in between. And no, the office of Peter is the exists in perpetuity doesn't mean that it is an unbroken line. For all we know, we're going to the end times, and hey, the second coming is happening sometime in the near future or in the far future, and we don't know how long the end times last either. So, it could be that, or it could be one of the other many prophecies that are like, oh, everything is going to go to crap, and then an actual valid pope will come back, and the church will continue. And there are these kind of prophecies as well in Catholicism. So who knows? It's not really a big concern for an actual Catholic. But of course, for pretend Catholics, churchians, and deceivers like J. Dyer, well, it's been uncomfortable because, they need somebody to tell them what to do all the time. They're not able to actually follow their conscience, be true to God and the Catholic Church and the rules of the Catholic Church without somebody beating them over the head the whole time. It's unfortunate, but that's most people, I suppose, which is why the Bible simply tells us that most people will go into the well-traveled road to hell. People seem to forget that only a tiny remnant of people will be left towards the end. And guess what? Sedevacantists are not exactly huge. I estimate them to be between 100,000 and a million. Conservative, if we're between conservative and sort of optimistic, I think we're about there. And a lot more happening now recently when after Ratzinger dropped dead, and everybody knows Bergoglio is clearly a heretic. So at best, I actually think he's just a Satanist. He was never Catholic to begin with. But anyway, I'm sort of going off the topic. Let me stick back to the thing.
This essential characteristic is defined at Vatican I and in Satis Cognitum to exist until the return of Christ, specifically until the end of the world. It's not saying, oh, at the end of the world, there's going to be a 100-year period, a 200-year period where there's no actual existing Roman successor who has the prerogatives of Peter.
Notice the deceptive practice of the Decepticon known as J. Dyer. And yes, it is another day because it takes more than one day to go through all the lies of the deceivers. He is trying to imply here that Vatican I states that immediately after, the death of the last pope, we're going to have the second coming. That's what he's trying to imply. But there is no such statement anywhere in Vatican I or Satis Cognitum. And he's basically trying to say, oh, well, the fact that it says, there will be a patron office in perpetuity until the second coming absolutely means there's got to be no space, without a pope. Well, that's absolute nonsense, of course. And there are, I think it might be over 100 prophecies in Catholic thought and Catholic saints that have pretty much described the situation of now, including the 2 popes and so on, before, not even before the end times, but before a very traumatic period that eventually becomes another 1,000 years of like really cool Catholic stuff, and then we get the end times. So who knows? Maybe we're in the end times, maybe not. But the implication that he tries to sneakily just sneak in is absolute nonsense, of course.
So he's going to try to introduce some divide between guys in an office who are popes, but don't actually have the authority and the charism of Peter. That's impossible. You can't have that. That's a direct violation of Vatican I. Vatican I specifies that you have to accept the Roman pontiff and the Roman curia, and who the Roman curia decides is the successor. This is the key linchpin that destroys all of sedevacantism, because they think that they can reject who the cardinals and the Roman curia elect as the pope. You cannot. You have no right to do that. The old code of canon law says you have to accept who the Roman curia accepts as the pope. And so he's laughing, but he doesn't understand that he has no right as a Catholic, an individual, to judge the Holy See.
The lies here just stack up. First of all, it's an absolute lie that any sedevacantist judges the Pope. And that's his main argument here, that, oh, you don't have the right, you have to accept who the cardinals vote as the Pope. No. First of all, we don't have to accept a persistent heretic as Catholic, never mind clergy, okay? That is in the canon law, Canon 188, Part 4, which they really hate. They hate this Canon 188, Part 4. They hate it so much that's why they try to rewrite the canon law of 1983, which is bullshit, of course. It's all created by people who are not even Catholic. So, no, Dyer is absolutely lying. There is no sedevacantist that is judging the Pope. First of all, because a fake Pope that is invalidly elected, there are rules for the election of a Pope, and Roncalli broke those rules in a number of ways. First of all, he was a Freemason, and as a Freemason you cannot be a Catholic, so he was already invalidly as a Catholic even before he got voted fake Pope. Secondly, Giuseppe Siri was voted Pope twice before they blackmailed him and said, no, you can't be Pope, otherwise all the bishops in the East will be killed off by the communists. So they blackmailed Siri into rejecting the papacy, which itself invalidates the vote of who's the real Pope. That is a rule in canon law. You cannot have a validly elected fake Pope or whatever as a result of blackmail or threats or so on. So there are already two reasons why Roncalli wasn't Pope anyway. But then there's a third reason. Roncalli was the guy who actually approved the first two documents of Vatican II. Now, one of those two documents was Inter Mirifica, which you could argue doesn't have heresy in it, but the other document does absolutely have heresy in it, and he approved it. He finalized it before he died. So, as with all the other more than 40 anti-popes, he can be, on that basis alone, judged to be a complete fake anti-pope after his death, which is how most anti-popes were judged anti-popes, by the way. Most of them were judged anti-popes after their death. So Roncalli absolutely was an anti-pope. And Montini absolutely is an anti-pope because he promulgated the other 14 documents of Vatican II, every one of which contains absolute heresy in it, direct heresy, as I describe in my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church. So, Canon 188 Part 4 is very clear. Somebody who defects from the faith publicly and notoriously, as they have done, being fake popes. They've done so more notoriously than anybody on the planet because the documents they published full of heresy are intended for the whole planet. You can't get more notorious than a fake pope that produces fake documents pretending to be Catholic. So no sedevacantist judges the Pope, first. Second point, even if he had been elected validly as Pope, which is not the case, but even if they had, once they become a heretic, that's it. They're no longer Pope. They no longer hold office. They're no longer Catholic. End of. Third point, the so-called cardinals who elected the subsequent popes are themselves heretics, have themselves promulgated notorious and public heresy, and are therefore absolutely not cardinals, absolutely not Catholics, and whatever they vote to become Pope is absolute nonsense because we don't recognize them even as Catholics, so they certainly have no right to vote anybody in as Pope. And in the present day, of course, everybody in the Vatican and everyone who continues to promulgate and pretend that Vatican II is not complete heresy is not a Catholic. It just simply is not. That is the simple, very basic rule of Canon Law of 188 Part 4. The Canon Law of 188 Part 4, by the way, is not a new thing that was invented in 1917. There are statements from the 1500s clearly stating that, a heretic even a valid pope who gets elected validly as a pope and then turns to become a heretic is no longer a pope, and everything he did means nothing. Cum ex apostolato officio is what Canon 188 Part 4 is based on, and the logic absolutely follow. And if you go and look at cum ex apostolato officio, which was an ex cathedra pronouncement of Paul IV, it's very, very clear. And a child gets this. If you are not a Catholic, if you do things that publicly and notoriously make it absolutely clear that you're going against the Catholic faith, you're not a Catholic. And if you're not a Catholic, guess what? You can't be the Pope. Just like, if you try and swing a golf ball and wearing, studded biker shoes at a football game, or at a basketball game, well, guess what? You're not a basketball player. This is really not difficult. But of course, Dyer uses the old canard, the old lie, that, sedevacantists are trying to judge the Pope. That's an absolute lie. We don't judge anybody. We simply follow the infallible magisterium of the Church. And by the way, we follow the not just the ordinary magisterium of the Church, but actually the official magisterium of the Church, which is embodied in Canon Law of 1917, because the Canon Law of 1917 was put together by a bunch of cardinals led by Gaspari, and as the result of Pope Pius X and Pope Benedict XV. So with all ex cathedra pronouncements, that is the official position of the Church. The Code of Canon Law of 1917 is the official, serious, severe magisterium of the Church, and it's infallible, and we're following that rule. That's all we're doing as Catholic. We're obeying the infallible magisterium of the Church. It's that simple. It's really not hard. But and Jay, he knows this, but he is a deceiver, and he's trying to lead people to hell for whatever reason. So that's what he does. He lies.
The old Code of Canon Law says no man judges who the Roman Curia accepts.
Again, not quite correct. What the old Code of Canon Law says is that no one has authority over the Pope, which is not to say that the infallible magisterium of the Church doesn't. What he says is no man, no normal mortal has a say over the Pope, because the Pope is there by divine law, really by divine inspiration, or whatever you want to call it. Which is not to say that everybody who ends up on the Petrine seat is a valid Pope. There have been more than 40 anti-popes before 1958, more than 40, okay? So clearly the Catholic Church has rules about who is and who isn't a real Pope. And clearly, when somebody is not a real Pope, everybody and anybody can and should absolutely say so. In fact, it is the duty of any Catholic to call out heresy wherever they see it. Absolutely, it is a duty of a lay person. And it's absolutely clear that if you follow the Code of Canon Law, every fake pope from Roncalli on has always and only been a fake pope. They're not even Catholic. The Vatican is filled with people who are not Catholic. They are Freemasons, Satanists, pedophiles, and so on and so forth. So again, the statement that, we have to accept and nobody can judge, the only judgment that can be passed on a pope is the infallible magisterium of the Church, which has happened more than 40 times before the present day. So yes, it does happen. Yes, it can happen. And the infallible magisterium of the Church does have the authority to judge the Pope, because the infallible magisterium of the Church is not one person, is not a mortal person. The infallible magisterium of the Church has the supernatural protection of Jesus Christ, our Lord, and therefore is infallible. It does not make errors. It cannot make errors, because it is supernaturally protected by Jesus Christ. And the magisterium of the Church has the authority to judge a fake pope as a fake pope. And they do, by the Canon Law of 188 Part 4, which clearly states that when that happens, that office is invalid, the person is no longer accepted as any kind of Catholic, and no one should accept them as any kind of Catholic. That's basically what it says. So we're just following the rules, man. You don't like it, but the rules make absolute sense. They fit, they flow, and they are correct.
So let's move on to where this is found. The essential characteristics of the Roman See are found, number one, in Denzinger 1821 through 24. Rome is identified as the actual seat. You can read the Catholic Encyclopedia on the Holy See, on the Roman Curia and the Roman congregations, that its decisions are final and that you do have to receive who they accept as the Pope. You don't have the right to judge who they accept and elect as the Pope. The Roman primacy is mentioned in these texts. There is also a living magisterial successor. Let me turn to one of the most famous traditional Catholic theologians, Ludwig Ott, Fundamentals of Catholic Dogma. On pages 279 to 281, he lists the very things that we just read in my description. He lists the primacy of St. Peter. He lists full and supreme jurisdiction. He lists that the Pope has the right to judge faith and morals and disciplinary decisions. Again.
And here we just have more deceptive behavior. There's nothing wrong in what he's saying, that yes, the Pope has primacy, the Pope has infallibility when he speaks ex cathedra, the Pope has primary jurisdiction, all true. If he is Pope, which these guys are not, you know. And yes, when a valid Pope is elected, the valid Pope has primacy, infallibility, jurisdiction over the entire church. Absolutely true. Yeah. When he's Pope. Yeah. Just that tiny little detail.
According to Vatican I, you don't have a right to reject the disciplinary decisions of the Pope.
Yeah, and nobody is rejecting the disciplinary decisions of any Pope. We're not rejecting anything by any Pope. We're just rejecting things by non-popes and non-clerics. And of course, I reject all your nonsense too, because, well, you're nobody. Just like Ratzinger and Roncalli and Wojtyla and all those guys. Nobodies. They're nobody that has any say in Catholicism at all.
You don't have a right to choose who you think the Pope is.
Once again, the same old tired lie. No one here is choosing who we think the Pope is. The infallible magisterium of the Church tells us that we have to reject fake non-Catholics as any kind of clergy. It's really simple, Jay. Can you read basic English? Canon 188, Part 4. Read it up. You've got the English translation. Read it in Latin. Latin is even clearer. They are not valid Catholics, never mind clergy. They have no office. No one needs to say anything. The law itself convicts them. It's very, very simple. A child gets it.
You don't have a right to decide which doctrines are ex cathedra and which aren't. You submit to the living magisterium.
Once again, the living magisterium spans over 2,000 years, and it is embodied in Canon Law of 1917. Quite correct. We can't reject any part of the Code of Canon Law of 1917, nor do we, including Canon 188, Part 4. Simple, isn't it? Yeah.
You must submit to the See of Rome, which includes the Roman Curia and its congregations.
And we do, and we would, if the Roman Curia was actually Roman Curia, which they're not when they're all invalid heretics at best, and in most cases are not validly ordained non-Catholics. They're Satanists, Freemasons, and pedophiles that do not even have valid ordination. Never mind actually being Catholic, So they're not even Catholic. Never mind priests or anything else. So yeah, we reject people that have got nothing to do with the actual Roman Curia, because the Vatican is currently empty of any valid priest, unless, I don't know, some sedevacantist priest has gone to see the Vatican on a tourist guide trip. All the ones present there are all Novus Ordo followers, and therefore they're completely invalid non-tenants of any kind of Catholic office or even Catholic at all.
So for sedevacantism or sedeprobationism, it doesn't matter. He's got some niche thing that he thinks will lead him out of this. Either one, it doesn't matter, because they have denied the fundamental constitution of the church to the end of the world, where for the last 60 plus years, they believe that they have the right in their own individual fallible decisions to choose who they want to accept and what they want to accept.
Once again, it looks like Jay thinks if he just keeps repeating the same lie more and more and more often, maybe it'll become true. No, it doesn't. For 60 plus years, all that sedevacantists have done, whether clergymen or bishops or laymen like myself, all we've done simply follow the infallible magisterium of the church. Not a single one of us has decided for themselves anything. We are Catholics, therefore we obey the infallible magisterium of the church. Not a difficult concept to understand. As long as you're humble and you obey the infallible magisterium of the church, you are a Catholic, and that's what we are. Those who don't do that and just make their own choices and seem to think you can abandon the infallible magisterium of the church at will, on the say-so of public notorious heretics who are not Catholics and pretend to be popes or priests or bishops, well, then you are the heretic. You are the guy who's making an individual, subjective, and wrong, erroneous decision. Not us. We're following the infallible magisterium of the church.
So in essence, they have to reject not just the extraordinary magisterium of the last 60 years, which there are with Vatican II. Vatican II is actually dogmatic. It's the dogmatic constitution of the church. It deals with faith and morals, and is from the apostolic see for all the entire church. That's all that's needed for extraordinary magisterial authority.
Well, let's count it on the fingers, shall we? Just like Jay does. Well, number one, Vatican II was begun by a notorious public heretic, a Freemason, and someone who was invalidly elected, Roncalli. And it was perpetrated by Montini, who was absolutely a heretic because he promulgated a heresy in every single one of the documents that he oversaw of Vatican II, 14 of them. So, yeah, they're not popes, so we don't have to do a damn thing that they say, and they're not anybody we should follow. And anyone who promotes their crap is not a Catholic. Yay! Look at that. Yeah. You just can keep repeating the same nonsense as long as you want, but the thing is, it's in black and white. The infallible magisterium of the church is embodied in the Code of Canon Law of 1917. It's all there. Just go read it, and you can't escape it. And I'll repeat myself. It doesn't matter what Denzinger said or what's in the book that he wrote. It doesn't matter what Ludwig Ott says or what's in the book he wrote. It doesn't matter what Thomas Aquinas said, okay, or St. Augustine. Doesn't matter. What matters is the infallible magisterium of the church, which is embodied in Code of Canon Law of 1917, as well as any ex cathedra pronouncements that were done by valid popes after 1917, which ended with Pope Pius XII on the 9th of October 1958. So, for example, Mystici Corporis, which Pope Pius XII wrote, is a valid encyclical, which you can tack on to the Code of Canon Law of 1917. Everything that happened before 1917 is embodied in the Code of Canon Law of 1917, and that's it. How you decipher the dogma of the church, the rules of the church, is by canon law. And Jay will admit this in a little while, as you will see, and he looks like a deer in headlights when he has to admit it. So it doesn't matter what went on before. It's like you've got a book that tells you the rules of the road. That's it. And you can say, oh, but that rule came from when people had horses, and then they had like blinkers on the horses, and then cars had like, lights that scared the horses, and that's where that rule originally came from. It doesn't matter. You've got a rule of the road in the book. You've got to follow that rule or you're breaking the law. End of. It's very simple. That's what the Code of Canon Law of 1917 does. Unlike any other religion, it puts down all the rules of the Catholic Church for about 2,000 years in one book. And then from 1917 to 1958, you've got a few other encyclicals and so on by actual valid popes that you can add to that. That's it. It's very simple. It's not difficult.
He also has to reject the universal ordinary magisterium, which Vatican I specifically says is under the charism of Peter and is universal and is infallible. And in fact, the only thing that he wants to reject, if he wants to reject something which he can reject, is the non-universal ordinary magisterial teaching. But guess what? In Roman Catholic moral theology, you have to submit to that with docility. So what we have here is a invisible church doctrine. the idea that I'm going to be in union with a vacant or a see with a privation that's in the way for the grace of the charism. And he's made this decision on the basis of what he's determined from canon law, but Roman Catholic theology does not allow him to make the decision on who is the Pope and who's valid as Pope. This is why
Once again, he's just repeating the same old lie that we're choosing who's Pope. And as I've said as many times as he keeps saying that lie, I'll keep telling you that it's absolute bullshit, because all you can do is pick up the Code of Canon Law and it's in there. That's what we're following, and that's all we're doing. We're doing what the infallible magisterium of the Church tells us to do, which is to reject public notorious heretics as being any kind of a Catholic. Very simple, very easy.
Vatican I is very clear that there will be no defections of the Roman See.
Once again, it just outright lies. Vatican I says no such thing. It simply states that the primacy of the Pope remains the primacy of the Pope, that the infallibility of the Pope remains the infallibility of the Pope, and that the Pope, when he's pronouncing things ex cathedra, is infallible. And that's basically it. Now, it absolutely does not say that there will never be any kind of... one other thing. He says, that you have to also respect the Holy See. What Vatican I makes absolutely clear, without any doubt whatsoever, is that the head of the Catholic Church on earth is the Pope. So, when you refer to the Holy See, the ultimate authority is the Pope. And in fact, it specifies that there shall be no ecumenical council that can override the Pope, or a group of bishops that can override the Pope. The Pope is the final authority. Now, absolutely clearly, it is not saying that every Pope has always been a good guy and infallible, because if they had been, then there wouldn't have been more than 40 anti-popes before Vatican I. So it's absolute nonsense. What he's saying is just an outright, flat-out lie. Now, the Church does say that there will never be a defection of the Church, that the Church will always be visible, but the Church is visible, and it hasn't defected, because there are still valid bishops and valid clergy and valid Catholics. So what he's saying there is, again, it's trying to confuse the waters by taking elements of what Vatican I says and then trying to conflate them with his own lies and nonsense. So you can read Vatican I, it's on the internet. It does not say what he just said it does.
And for him to ever have a Pope again, according to Vatican I, it can never occur. Why can it never occur? Is it because bishops couldn't get together and elect another Pope? Sure. There are sedevacantists conclavists who have done this, who have gotten together and elected their own little popes, many of them. And they're actually more consistent than the sedevacantists or the SSPX, because they understand that the promise of Vatican I is that the perpetuity and the essential constitution of the Church and its Roman office will continue until the end. So you can't have this 60-plus year vacancy. Why can you not? Because all of the Roman curia who would elect the next Pope, that's Roman dogma on how you get the Pope now.
Well, by now his lies should be obvious, but when he says that the only way to get a Pope is by the Roman Curia voting him in, no, that's not correct. There are divine rules and there are church rules. Now, there are church rules that were changed by various popes over time, valid popes, and then those same rules about how to vote the Pope in were changed again by were pretend changed by fake invalid popes like Roncalli and so on, who suddenly, and Montini, who said, instead of 70 cardinals, we're going to have 120, and then anybody over 80 can't vote, because they wanted to put in their own, Freemasons in to do the fake votes. But again, these are not popes, so their rules don't count. But let's look at the actual original rules of the voting of the Pope, which there were rules that came about as the Church expanded, became bigger, and so on. But that's not to say that the old way that it was done is suddenly invalid. The future doesn't invalidate the past doesn't invalidate the future. The dogmatic laws of the Church have always been the dogmatic laws of the Church, and in the event that there is no valid cardinal or valid bishop in the Vatican, the remaining valid bishops and remaining valid priests can and do and have in the past voted in the next pope, as used to happen, in the year 200 or 300 and so on. So he's again talking absolute nonsense and lying again about what Vatican I says and what Vatican I doesn't say. So I don't know. There's not much I can say about that. Read Vatican I for yourselves, and you'll see that he's just talking absolute rubbish.
It's been codified for centuries. That's how the Pope comes to be. You can't have bishops who don't have jurisdiction, who aren't licit, electing a new pope in Kansas or in Palmyra or wherever else the conclavists want to have it. That's why Vatican I destroys sedevacantism and sedepravationism, because they have to deny the perpetuity of the authority of the apostolic see until the end, and they have to grant a 60 plus 100 year, whatever it is, vacancy of the apostolic see. Well, guess what? If there's been a vacancy or a privation for that long, you don't have a curia who won't be Orthodox. All the curia are going to be heretics because they've accepted Vatican II. So you're going to have a curia of a bunch of heretics electing the next pope. That's impossible on the doctrine of the indefectibility of the Roman See.
Once again, I agree that a bunch of heretics cannot vote in the next pope as a valid pope. That's precisely what's happened. A bunch of heretics have voted in yet another heretic, or not even Catholic. So non-Catholics pretending to be Catholics have voted in a non-Catholic pretending to be pope. And some people fall for it, and have for 60 years. But that's neither here nor there. That has happened, yes. But when you're saying that the Vatican I says that the apostolic see will never end and it will never all be converted, it doesn't say that. There's nowhere in Vatican I that it says that the apostolic see in Rome, as he keeps trying to say, can ever be invalidated. Or, of course it has been invalidated even in the past. In fact, the apostolic see has not always been in Rome. So it's absolute nonsense. What he's saying is just flat out lies. There's no way really around it. And it is canonic law and also common sense, of course. But, that if they invalid, the whole of the Vatican is filled with invalid curia, then they're invalid. End of. And as has always been the case in the Catholic Church from the very first, saints, was it Saint Athanasius or Ignatius, that said, wherever the last bishop is, that's where the church is. So as long as there are valid clerics, valid bishops, and valid laymen, Catholics, the Catholic Church continues to exist. The fact that the interregnum has been over 60 years is unfortunate, but there is absolutely nothing that says it can't last that long. And in fact, we've had periods of over 70 years where you didn't really know who the Pope was, because there was 2 and even 3 of them at the time. 2 of them posthumously after the fact, when it becomes clear what's what, were obviously declared anti-popes. But if you were living in that 70-year period when you had 2 and even 3 popes, you couldn't necessarily be certain of which one was the Pope. Doesn't mean that it ended. There was periods of a couple of years where there was absolutely no Pope at all. And so what? The church ended? No, it didn't. All that happens is that all the bishops that are still valid bishops don't have any jurisdiction, because the jurisdiction rests solely with the Pope. So they act as if, when promoting or ordaining other priests and other bishops, they act as if they have that jurisdiction, which has always been the case throughout history. Whenever there was an interregnum, if somebody got elected or ordained bishop by other bishops, when there was no valid pope on the throne, when the new pope comes up, unless that new pope says, no, that guy is not a bishop, it's automatically assumed positively that the ordained bishops were validly ordained. And that's how the church has continued to exist for the last 60 plus years, and will continue to exist until the second coming, or until they elect an actual valid new pope. Now, what he's saying about, some guys in Kansas have elected their own Pope, yeah, that was a guy, his mom, and about 2 other people that decided that he was going to be a trailer trash Pope. That's what we call them. No, actual sedevacantists understand that there is no point when the majority of supposed Catholics don't understand what's happened, what Vatican II is. There's no point in trying to elect a new valid pope until a majority of supposed nominal Catholics actually educate themselves and come to the conclusion that sedevacantism is actual Catholicism as it is, and that may take some time. And we've got many, many prophecies that say that there's going to be a very, very dark time indeed before that happens. And how long that lasts, nobody knows. Or it may be the second coming, and then it's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse until only a very tiny remnant of believers are left and Jesus comes back. It's one of those two options, and either one is being currently fulfilled without any issue for anyone who's actually a Catholic. So again, he's just making stuff up.
So this heretic actually believes that the Roman See has defected, as he holds a Nestorian stupid doctrine about how the Roman See has not defected because there are still successors, that he doesn't accept their magisterial teaching. So he's a heretic.
And well, that's just some spurious nonsense, because you're not a heretic for rejecting heretics. So, he's just like trying to throw in some ad hominem insults there that have got no basis in fact, but, again, meaningless crap.
All right. You finished up right at 12 minutes pretty much. Gave you a little extra 15 seconds there. And I'll show the same courtesy to Kurgan. He has 8 minutes, and his time begins now.
Right. Now, all of what Jay has said is pretty much nonsense, and he refers to Ludwig Denzinger, the Catholic Encyclopedia.
Ludwig Denzinger? You can't even name the people.
It's all irrelevant. Hold on. Don't interrupt, Jay. Hold on. Be emotionally consistent.
Yeah, here is the idiotic point where it's quite clear if you listen to me speaking. I'm saying Ludwig Denzinger. It's Ludwig, Denzinger. It doesn't matter who these people, what they've said. The fact they've written whole books about Catholicism and what the supposed dogma of the church is, it's irrelevant. And I include, again, Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine, other doctors of the church. It doesn't matter. Ludwig Ott and person, Denzinger, another person, have written books and books about Catholic dogma. Irrelevant. It doesn't matter what they wrote, because we have the Code of Canon Law that encompasses everything that they wrote up to and including 1917. Very clear. And now he's trying to make a whole thing about, you don't know who Denzinger was. No, I do know who Denzinger was, and I know he wrote a book also referred to as Denzinger by people. It's just weird that he's just trying to hang on to that as though that was relevant. Even if I didn't know who Ludwig Ott was, or Denzinger, or what they had written, it doesn't matter, because there's the Code of Canon Law. As it happens, I do know, and the fact that I'm speaking quickly and say Ludwig, Denzinger, whatever, it's irrelevant. Okay, it's not a relevant point. He tries to make it a relevant point because he's got nothing else to hang on to. But it's very clearly explained also in the blog post, and there's idiots, pretend Catholics, that have tried to say, it was embarrassing that the Kurgan didn't know Denzinger was a book, or that Denzinger was a person, and the reply by Vox, actually, who's not even Catholic, says it's embarrassing that your understanding of this doesn't even rise to the Wikipedia knowledge. It's Denzinger was both a person and referred to as the book that he wrote. So it's just, but in any case, they're irrelevant, because everything that they said is encompassed in Canon Law of 1917. That's all that matters.
So he names these guys, and they're irrelevant because it's not canon law.
Just in case it wasn't clear, notice that I said he names these guys, plural. So it's clear that I obviously knew that Ludwig and Denzinger are different people, okay? Just little pertinent point for the autists who just they try and think that Dyer was right. He's not. He's a liar, and he's just trying to hang on to scraps of stuff that are not relevant.
And it's not papal encyclicals, which are really where the laws of the Catholic Church come from. Now, he did say two things that I do agree with. he said that no man has the authority to judge the Holy See of the Catholic Church, and as a Catholic, you cannot reject the magisterium of the Church. I actually agree with these 2 points. And let me explain why everything else that he said doesn't make any sense. It's entirely correct on these 2 points, but no sedeprivationist is judging the Pope, nor ignoring the magisterium of the Church. In fact, quite the opposite. It's the very magisterium of the Church which put together the Code of Canon Law of 1917. The Code of Canon Law of 1917 identifies all the laws of the Catholic Church, and essentially Code 188 Part 4 says that a heretic, without anyone required to make any official pronouncement, becomes an invalid cleric right away. So this is a very sensible law, and most of the laws in the Code of Canon Law are very sensible and easy to follow. If you want to go into the details of it, at my blog at gfilotto.com, I actually put up a written exposition of this. On the 7th of September, there's a blog post on it. So if you want to go to details, you can go there. Secondly, the papal office itself, in the form of the papal encyclical of Paul IV, Cum ex apostolatus officio, which Dyer refers to in his video, makes it abundantly clear that fake popes, impostor popes, heretic popes are not popes at all and should be completely and utterly ignored, as should any of their pronouncements, edicts, or promotions of the clerics. So once again, I'm not going against the papal encyclicals or the Catholic dogma or the magisterium of the Church. Now, in his arguments, essentially, what Mr. Dyer is trying to do is saying that sedevacantists, he conflates them with, wandering bishops and trailer park popes, and that they're just a small online movement. Well, if you go to ecclesia.luxvera.org, you will find that there are 364 churches made of brick and mortar listed there, 179 of them in the USA alone. So it's not a small online movement. And that doesn't take into account all the meetings that happen in halls and people's houses with valid priests to do the sacraments. So it is a big movement. In the zeitgeist of the world, it's a big movement anyways, which is why Bergoglio is now sort of being exposed, him and the other pedophiles in the Vatican, almost daily. And he's gone from being the best thing since sliced bread to, now almost every nominal Catholic sort of doesn't like the guy. And why? Because the sedevacantist movement keeps growing, and its effect on the world is pretty impactful. I mean, the most famous film ever made on Jesus Christ, The Passion, was made by Mel Gibson, who is a sedevacantist who rejects Vatican II. So again, we're not rejecting the Pope, we're not rejecting the magisterium of the Church, and I don't really care what Denzinger, Ludwig, or the Catholic Encyclopedia says. It's irrelevant, because canon law is where actually the laws are stated. The papal encyclicals clearly state that we've had a heretic pope. And third, I don't disagree with the fact that the bishops vote the new pope in. The reason that sedevacantists are not doing that, and by the way, all the churches that are on that blog site I just gave, they are in communion, even when they do disagree on certain points. There's a thing going on at the moment between one of the bishops not following canon law in worldly matters and other people disagreeing with him. And yet, he refers people to other bishops that will give the sacraments that he denies to people that don't follow his authority. And the other bishops say, yeah, that he's wrong in that, but you can still take the sacraments with him if you just keep quiet, because he doesn't actually have any worldly authority. And the reason they're not electing a new pope is simply because, again, people like J. Dyer would say, oh, you're just a bunch of crazy guys electing your own pope. It makes no sense. Let's wake up all the Catholics to the reality of the facts, which is happening. It's taken a long while because it's been a long time since Vatican II, and it was a massive blow to the church, but not a fatal one. The church is still around, still visible, and in my rebuttal, which happens next, I will go through the details of exactly how that works. So, I mean, that's basically it. I don't know how much time have I got left, because I didn't check.
Let me unmute myself. You still have about 3 minutes left. If you want to stop, all right, you can.
So, yeah, I mean, let me, those 2 points about sedevacantism being a fragmented little movement that's mostly online. I believe that Mr. Dyer is fully aware that this is not the case, because, like I said, he was a sedeprivationist himself, or a sedevacantist, whatever you want to call it. The fact that fake bishops of what I call the Novus Orco Church, the new Orc Church, are being exposed daily, being child traffickers and child molesters, and the fact that the Pope is friends with Vera, a guy who is known to be child trafficking. It comes from the fact that a lot of people are going online to find out these details. And the Code of Canon Law is very, very clear on this. Now, the reason I reject the new code, fake new Code of Canon Law, is because the same fake invalid clerics who don't reject Vatican II put it together. So, the same guys who are heretics, not Catholics, not valid clerics, put together a new Code of Canon Law. And by the way, if you look at the new Code of Canon Law, it's designed to completely invalidate what the only valid Code of Canon Law of 1917 says. So, of course, I reject it. It's created by heretics. So that's it for my rebuttal. And let me know when I can start my.
Yeah, that's it. By the way, I know we didn't agree to this, and you guys can refuse or not. But Chad is asking for a back and forth round. We can talk about that after if you want to do that. But it's your time for your 12 minutes now. Give me a second. Let me reset the clock, and you're on the clock right now.
Okay. So now the main claim that he makes is that the head and foundation of the Catholic Church is the Pope, and without a visible and valid Pope in office, the Church fundamentally ceases to exist. This is basically what he's saying. Now, he refers to Mystici Corporis, which is a papal encyclical of 1943 by Pope Pius XII, and he refers to Satis Cognitum, a papal encyclical of Leo XIII, both of which these papal encyclicals happened after Vatican I, and Mystici Corporis refers to it. So it makes sense to use these documents, as they're the most recent ones before Vatican II that explain some stuff about the Church. Now, Mystici Corporis is essentially explaining the mystical body of Christ. I totally reject what Mr. Dyer is saying about the fact that the Pope is, the complete head of the Church, and if he isn't visible, the Church ceases to exist, for a number of very simple reasons. First of all, Mystici Corporis itself. There are 113 paragraphs in Mystici Corporis, and only 2, if you squint just so, and you look at it in complete isolation and ignore the rest of the document entirely, could you even remotely interpret them as supporting Mr. Dyer's astonishing theory? These are paragraphs 41 and 69. However, there are at least 16 other paragraphs that directly and unambiguously state that the only head of the Church is Jesus Christ, and that he acts through those he chooses on earth, including the lowest of the low in times of crisis. In particular, this refers to paragraphs 46 through to 60. Time prevents me to go into it, but we can go into it a bit more if we have more time at the end.
Sure.
In addition to these 16 paragraphs I just mentioned, there are more that clearly point out that the highest offices are not free from being taken over by evil and turned men, and that Jesus permits this as a teaching moment, really, so that those who do hold the faith can come to the fore in unexpected and almost miraculous ways. More specifically, paragraph 66, which warns us that even the most exalted are not immune to turning against the truth and the Church, and paragraph 86 and 87, which explain we have free will to go against Jesus, but this is not Jesus' fault because he wants us to participate in his realm and not be blindly obedient sheep who do things like robots. Paragraph 39 and 44 are both probably the paragraphs who most beautifully contextualize instead of atomize, which is what Mr. Dyer does with Mystici Corporis. We probably don't have time to go through all of them, but I'm going to read through paragraph 44 just because I think it sort of embodies the whole document quite well. And it reads as follows. Because Christ, the head, holds such an eminent position, one must not think that he does not require the help of the body. What Paul says of the human organism is to be applied likewise to the mystical body. The head cannot say to the feet, I have no need of you. It is manifestly clear that the faithful need the help of the divine Redeemer, for he has said, without me you can do nothing. In other words, everything that happens is because of Jesus. And it continues. And according to the teachings of the apostles, every advance of this mystical body towards its perfection derives from Christ the head. In other words, Jesus Christ is the head, not the Pope. The Pope is the visible representative on earth, and we'll get to that in a minute. Continuing, yet this also must be held, marvelous though it may seem, Christ has need of his members. First, because the person of Jesus Christ is represented by the Supreme Pontiff, who in turn must call on others to share much of his solicitude, lest he be overwhelmed by the burden of his pastoral office, and must be helped daily by the prayers of the Church. Moreover, as our Savior does not rule the Church directly in a visible manner, he wills to be helped by the members of his body in carrying out the work of redemption. And now there's a little bit of a passage. I'll read it all anyway. This is not because he's indigent and weak, but rather because he has so willed it for the greater glory of his spotless spouse. So dying on the cross, dying on the cross, he left to his church the immense treasury of the redemption, towards which she contributed nothing. In other words, everything happened because of Jesus. The church didn't redeem anything, he did. But when those graces come to be distributed, not only does he share this work of sanctification with his church, but he wills that in some way it be due to her action. In other words, he wants us to be, co-redemptors and sort of help the realm along. This is a deep mystery and an inexhaustible subject of meditation, that the salvation of many depends on the prayer and voluntary penances which the members of the mystical body of Jesus Christ offer for this intention, and on the cooperation of pastors of souls and of the faithful, especially of fathers and mothers of families, a cooperation which they must offer to our divine Savior as though they were his associates. It goes on in other paragraphs to state that in times of crises, normal people come up, and people who do hold the faith strongly come up to prove the point. So again, one of the most fundamental people that are required are fathers and mothers, which clearly are not the clerical the clerics of the Catholic Church, since they can't be married and so on. Now, so I advise everybody to read Mystici Corporis. It's online at papalencyclicals.net, and you can see for yourself, so that I'm not making this up. Secondly, he quotes Satis Cognitum, or pretends to quote Satis Cognitum itself. And in order to try and support his idea, Mr. Dyer quotes something at 1 hour, 16 minutes and 35 seconds in his video, Sedevacantism Proves Orthodox Theology. And I quote, I'm now quoting J. Dyer, "The Roman pontiff possesses supreme jurisdiction in the church, jure divino. It was necessary that the government be of this kind, since it belongs to the constitution and formation of the church as its principal element. Its principle of unity, its foundation of everlasting stability, can in no wise come to an end," end quote. And he uses this as a supposed quote being definitive and conclusive evidence of his position as stated by Pope Leo XIII himself. There's only one problem. This quote doesn't appear anywhere in Satis Cognitum, and you can verify this for yourself, again, at papalencyclicalsonline.net. So once again, Mr. Dyer is simply either making things up out of whole cloth or conflating different things to make them into an unwholesome new mess. The historical objective fact that the church has many times had no valid or visible popes is a fact. It happens every time between popes, and it happens when we have an anti-pope or a fake pope in the chair, which has happened again more than 40 times before 1958 in the current situation. But perhaps most damning of all is the papal encyclical, which Mr. Dyer mentions and briefly skips over, very quickly skips over it, which is interesting, since this papal encyclical of Paul IV of 1559 unambiguously and directly spells out not only that there have been and could be again fake popes, heretics, and even validly elected popes that later become heretic and as such become completely invalid, it also very clearly and directly points out that any rules, laws, edicts, promotions made by any such fake popes are to be treated as completely invalid alongside with all the people that may have elected to various offices. In other words, the very opposite position of what Mr. Dyer claims is part of the Catholic Church official position. Anti-popes have always existed and will again, and they must be rejected in the absolute and in their totality. So again, the church's very rules make it very clear that you can have fake popes. And fifthly, in his video, Mr. Dyer says, that the sacraments and all the bishops are invalid and therefore you can't have sacraments. Again, this is just nonsense. Whenever you have no pope on the chair or a fake pope, the bishops and priests continue to issue sacraments uninterrupted. So I don't know where it comes up with that claim. He then makes a bunch of other claims on sedevacantism, but I wanted to address very quickly what he said about, the fundamental things of the church according to Denzinger. I don't care who Denzinger is. There have been numbers of theologians all over the place. It's irrelevant. What the magisterium of the church says is what's relevant. Now, I do agree that the Pope does have primacy over all the other bishops when he's around. So if we do have a valid Pope, then you obey him, you listen to him, and his word is law. That's fine. We just don't have one at the moment. So what we've got to go on is the magisterium of the church that has been left with us, and those bishops and priests who reject Vatican II and therefore are not schismatic heretics, parts of the new Novus Ordo Church. So why don't we elect the Pope, which, by the way, again, Mr. Dyer tries to conflate, trailer park popes and the current bishops, which actually are sedevacantists or sedeprivationists. And it's just dishonest, because all these bishops are in communion with each other. I know for a fact, because I'm intimately involved with some of these things. And even when they disagree on certain ideas or principles, they still refer people to one another in terms of getting valid sacraments. Now, it would make no sense to try and elect the Pope now, for the very reason that, as we've discussed here and as we're seeing, most people have been deceived. Most so-called nominal Catholics, which are 1.2 billion, haven't got a clue, because they haven't kept their eye on the ball. They haven't read the laws. They haven't read the canon law. So they don't know that they're being cheated. This is why there is such a strong education going on online, which bypasses the mass media, and it's happening. And again, the points that he made are just not what he said. So I think I'm done. I think I've got a couple of seconds left. But I don't know.
You have about 1 minute and 50 seconds left if you want to say something there.
Well, he makes another bunch of claims about why, if the church had actually been infiltrated and hijacked, this proves indefectibility. But again, I refer to Ex Apostolatus Officium, which clearly indicates that we've had many anti-popes before, and that didn't crash the church, end it, or anything. As for the idea that, it's 61 years, so it's too much, there is no rule, no dogmatic principle, no papal encyclical that says, you only have X number of years without a valid pope before it all collapses. That's nowhere. That's just a J. Dyer interpretation. That's me done.
All right, you're done. J. Dyer, you have 8 minutes and your time begins now.
Yeah, one of the things I like to do when I can assess when an opponent doesn't know what he's talking about is refer to things that I don't think he'll know what they are. And we saw that just now. This guy is off the charts, arrogant, not even knowing what Denzinger is. Anybody who is fluent in Catholic theology at a basic theological level knows that Denzinger is not a fallible man with fallible opinions. Denzinger is the collection of Roman dogmas of the papacy, you buffoon.
Oh, and how relevant is Denzinger, the person, or Denzinger, the book that he wrote? How do you administer the dogma of the church? How do you enact the dogma of the church? How do you? By canon law. So it makes absolutely no difference what anything that happened before 1917 or anyone said before 1917. It doesn't matter. The canon law of 1917 embodies all of the documents and all of the dogma of the Catholic Church up to and including 1917. And Denzinger and Ludwig and Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine all happened before that. So whatever they said that was in any way relevant, whatever any pope said that was in any way relevant, has all been combined into the Code of Canon Law of 1917. Why is that so hard for them to understand? It isn't. And as you will see later in this very video, J. Dyer has to admit that, and he does, and then panics.
You just shot yourself in the foot coming on here, making hours and hours of videos, calling me a moron, and you don't know that Denzinger is the sources of Catholic dogma. You called it, I quote, Ludwig Denzinger. I cited Ludwig Ott as a Catholic theologian. No. So you don't know the sources of Catholic dogma. You see this 800-page book? I read it twice. You don't know. You don't even know what it is. It's the sources of Catholic dogma. That's why everyone's laughing and you lost the debate in your first rebuttal. Now, let's get on to your claims. First of all, did I say that? What did I say about the election of the Pope? I said that if we've had a vacancy of 60 plus years, who elects the Pope in Roman Catholic canon law? You said I didn't cite canon law. I cited multiple code of canon law from the 1917 code. I did too. I listed them. Maybe you weren't listening.
Oh, except I was listening. And not only have I done it in writing, I've now done it in video too. And I've quoted everyone and looked at every one of those codes of canon law that you mentioned. that are completely irrelevant to the point at hand. And you're just hoping that people who won't look it up and don't have the book or don't care about it enough to go and check will just think that you're right. But I and you know that you're a liar, Jay, and that you're wrong, because liars are wrong. Got it? Simple? Yeah?
Maybe you didn't hear that, but I cited Canons 149. Canons 219. (154 through 160). (162). 230 to 241. and 164. (180 on). The Roman Curia elects and decides who the Pope is, not you.
And now that we've added the actual writing of each one of those codes of canon law, so you can see for yourself, just pause the video and you can check every one of them has got absolutely nothing to do with what he's saying. Now that you've seen all that, what does he come up with? Oh, the same old lie, that it's me deciding who the Pope is. No, it's not me. It's the infallible magisterium of the Church, and it's code 188, part 4, which I will now put up here.
You don't care? That's your code of canon law, Goofus, the one that you said I didn't cite.
That's fine.
Vatican, no, it's not fine. You said I didn't cite it. I did cite it. I listed them. You didn't listen. Vatican I says who the head of the church is, and it's the Pope. Session 4, chapter 2 says the Pope is the head of the church on earth. You said that it's Jesus who's the head of the church. Yeah, Roman Catholic dogma says that Jesus is the head of the church and that the visible earthly head is the Pope, who is in perpetuity in succession to the end of the world, having visible successors. That's what Vatican I says. You don't know what Pastor Eternus is. I didn't just cite Satis Cognitum and Mystici Corporis. I cited Vatican I. Exactly. So you look at Session 4, chapter 2, which calls the Pope the earthly head. And it says that his office and the essential constitution of the church continue to the end of the world. Did you not notice that? That was the argument. You don't care. You don't care. So you don't accept the last 60 years of successors. So that fundamental office of Peter has lost its essential properties. It doesn't function the way it did for the last 1800, 1900 years, correct?
No, it functions fine.
How does it function fine when you don't accept the last 60 plus years of successors?
Well, it's just not there. So what?
So it doesn't function if it's not there. That's why you're a Gnostic heretic.
No, it's not there because it's not there. It's happened before, plenty of
Yeah,
times.
that's why you're a heretic. You reject Vatican I. It says it exists in perpetuity in the exact same form with visible successors until the end of the world.
It doesn't actually say that it has to.
It does says that. It says until the return of Christ. It says until the end of the ages.
Has Christ returned?
Yeah, so the See of Peter exists in the same form as it did at the time of Vatican I until the end of the world. The time of Peter all the way to the end.
It doesn't say that, Jay.
It does say that. It says until the return, till the end of the ages.
As Jesus returned.
No.
Okay. Therefore, you don't know that there isn't going to be yet another pope at some point in the future.
It says that the office and the fundamental constitution of the church can't change. So you have a defection of the Roman See.
No, we've had a defection of the Roman See plenty of times by your definition.
That's not a defection.
No,
A vacancy is not a defection.
we've had anti-popes. We've had vacancies that.
So what?
More than
That's not a defection of the Roman See, according to Vatican I. There's no defection of the Roman See. It says it's impossible.
Right, and there isn't one. I don't know why.
You just said there was a defection with anti-popes.
And again, here he tries to conflate two things. Defection of the Roman See, and he's trying to conflate two different topics. He's trying to conflate all of the cardinals, bishops, etc. that are in the Vatican, and, or rather, / the Pope. Now, the Pope is one thing, and the Holy See is he's the head of the Holy See. So when you're saying the Holy See is defected, by his definition, not by my definition, he's basically saying that the church is defected every time that there is no head of the Holy See, which has happened over 260 times over the last 2,000 years. So that's nonsense. Then he's trying to imply that the entirety of the Vatican constitutes the Holy See, and that has defected. Now, it doesn't matter if the entirety of the Vatican gets nuked by an atom bomb and there isn't a single person left in all of Rome, okay? It doesn't end the Catholic Church. All that does, it ends the Holy See there. And again, he's conflating the concept of perpetuity. Perpetuity just means that there's going to keep being one until there isn't. It's like a forever thing until the second coming of Jesus Christ. So gaps in between, as I said, have happened over 260 times. At times for a couple of years where there's literally no physical person on the throne, and at times a period of up to 70 years when there's 2 or 3 different guys and you don't know which one is the real one until quite some time after they die. So it's nonsensical to say that the Holy See has defected. What I was trying to do here is trying to respond to his interpretation of it, which is nonsensical. The Holy See hasn't defected in the sense that it's empty at the moment. So what? It's been empty before in terms of the Pope not being there. And the Holy See in Rome, which he, in his original video, he kept going on, it has to be the one in Rome, it has to be the one in Rome. It's absolute nonsense because, of course, the Holy See was in Avignon for a good number of years, not Rome. So again, he's just talking rubbish.
Pardon me?
Oh my God.
I didn't hear what you said.
We move on. So he said I didn't cite canon law. I cited many. I cited the canon law, which says you don't judge the Pope.
Yes, Jay, we've seen how you've cited canon law willy-nilly, just throwing in everything in there, hoping nobody checks. Except I have canon law, and I've read it twice. Yeah, like you read Denzinger twice. Well, I actually read canon law twice. So, yeah, you're lying, and you're just bringing up irrelevant shit that doesn't mean anything and doesn't have any point to what you're trying to say. And everybody can just go back now and freeze frame and read the whole canons that you quote one by one and see that they're totally irrelevant to this point. Totally.
He said I didn't cite encyclicals. I cited Denzinger, which is above encyclicals. Denzinger includes encyclicals. It's the ordinary universal magisterial teaching of the church. You didn't even know what Denzinger was. He said that there are hundreds of chapels. I'm responding to you. Yeah. Well, you haven't read it because you would know what it is, right?
I have.
What is that?
This is the code of Pioneer Benedictine canon law, which
I'm talking about Denzinger, and I listed for you all the canons.
These are the laws, not Denzinger.
Denzinger is the papal dogmas, you goofus. You didn't even know that.
It's an interpretation.
Yes, it is. What do you mean no? You just lost the debate. Enchiridion Symbolorum. It's the papal dogmas. It's the list of papal dogmas. It's not Denzinger, his opinions.
No.
You didn't know what it was.
The laws of the Catholic Church are in one book. They're here.
No, they're not.
Yes, they are.
No, they're not.
And here we've reached desperation. I mean, it's called the Pio Benedictine Book of Canon Law. It is the laws of the church. It is all the rules of the church up to and including 1917. And he's trying to say it isn't. He's trying to say that what's in Denzinger supersedes canon law? No, it doesn't, because Denzinger and Ludwig Ott and Thomas Aquinas and St. Augustine and all the other doctors of the church that happened before 1917 are all included in canon law. That's the whole point. That's why Cardinal Gaspari went over through how many thousands of documents. I think it was 14 or 26,000, I forget now. It's probably over 40,000 documents all told. And then they had a period of another 40 or 50 years where they had anybody write in who had any queries. And there was one tiny change made by Pope Pius XII to Code 1099 Part 2 only. So it is the rules of the Catholic Church. And you start to say, no, it's not. It's panic. It's panic of an ignorant person who's just been caught out being a liar. That's what it is, and that's what you're seeing here.
You don't know what Denzinger, you just made a fool of yourself. You lost the debate, and you talked nonsense for hours, and you just got demolished. I told you I would demolish you.
Whichever theologian you want, it's irrelevant.
It's not a theologian, it's the dogmas, and every trad Catholic knows that.
It's not the magisterium of the church, and
This is the magisterial teaching of the church.
No,
and every trad Catholic knows that. That's canon law. That's the application of the dogmas.
You see, here, he hasn't even realized yet that he's admitted he's completely lost every kind of debate he was trying to say regarding Denzinger and canon law. He himself admits that canon law is the application of the dogmas. Thank you very much, Jay, which is exactly what I've been saying from the beginning. So it doesn't matter who said what about which dogma in the 1800s or the 1400s or the year 30. It doesn't matter, because the way that you apply the dogma of the Catholic Church is canon law. He said it himself. He knows this. He knows he's a liar, and he's just trying to dodge and weave and bob and trying to get some kind of, I don't know, following of morons, really, because logic is pretty simple here. You know, it's a 2 + 2 + 4 type thing. You know, equals 8, and it's not like 2 + 2 + 4 = 92. It's just Jay Dyer admitting he's totally screwed up now, and he's going to realize this in a little while.
Exactly.
This is the dogmas.
No, the dogmas are the
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. Well, there is not a Catholic in the world who will deny that Denzinger is the dogmas of the church.
Okay, Jay, I guess people will just have to find out for themselves.
Everybody already knows it. The entire chat knows this.
Maybe your guys know that.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Do you know where I got this? From a trad chapel, from an SSPX chapel.
The SSPX are not Catholics. They're heretics.
Right. But the trads agree amongst themselves, right? Oh, wait, the sedas agree amongst themselves, right?
Yeah, the sedas do. And SSPX.
No, they don't. No, they don't. I cited in my video the largest online group, which are Feeneites. When you made your video, you went against Feeneites.
I don't know who you're talking
about. You don't
about.
agree.
I don't know who you're talking about. I don't know these people. And I'm pretty.
Well, then you should have paid attention to the video that you were responding to, because that's who the video was against.
Jay, I can quote some random little schismatic idiot. It doesn't mean that
it's the largest online group of sedevacantists.
That's what you say.
They're way larger than you.
No, you don't even know. There's no group. There's no like little name.
Okay, so there's no Diamond Brothers. There's no Vatican Catholic with 100,000 subscribers on YouTube.
The Diamond Brothers or me or whoever is just a guy talking.
I said they're the largest online group of sedevacantists is what I said.
But there's no cohesion of the online groups. They're just people like myself.
There's no cohesion of the groups at all. They don't cohere.
No, there's cohesion.
The groups that you listed in your list of chapels, they don't agree.
No, the clergy do all respect.
No, they do not. Total nonsense.
Again, you're just talking shit.
No, I'm not talking shit. I was in these groups, and everybody who's spent time in these groups knows that these groups fracture more than Protestants.
That's your interpretation, mate.
Yeah, okay, whatever. Sedevacantists, sedeprivationists, which of these positions is true if they're unified?
Well, it's a misnomer, because sedevacantism comes from the Latin and simply says empty chair. Now, the chair is physically not empty because it's filled by an imposter. So sedeprivation is the correct term. And I don't know. I've never met a single so-called sedevacantist that is actually not a sedeprivationist. We all know that the chair is not empty.
They're two different opinions. They're two different positions.
No, by the way, I agree. That's one thing I said that I agree with you, that the Roman Curia, for the most part, what you're saying is that if Vatican II is heretic, then most of the Roman Curia are also heretics. Absolutely true. Yes, I agree with you. Yes, they are. Except those bishops that did not stick with Vatican II, that rejected it.
They're not the Roman Curia. They're not the Holy See.
They are. Any bishop.
No, they're not. The Roman Curia is the holy congregations in Rome.
And as I mentioned before, notice that it says in Rome, as if, again, if Rome was hit by a nuclear bomb and everybody in Rome was gone, what? The Catholic Church stops existing? No. Whoever is left that is a valid bishop becomes automatically the place where the Catholic Church resides. So in that respect, they are the only valid clerics that can, in time, if and when it becomes opportune, elect a valid pope. So they are, in essence, what he calls the Roman Curia, which, by the way, could be in Timbuktu. Doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be in Rome. And it wasn't in Rome for many years when it was in Avignon.
No,
Catholic Encyclopedia. That's what canon law defines it as.
This is again in Mystici Corporis. It clearly explains it that all the bishops of the Catholic Church are part of the Roman Curia. And
they're not. What is the Roman Curia? I'll read it for you. At Catholic Encyclopedia. Strictly speaking, the ensemble of departments and ministries which assist the Roman pontiff. These are the Roman congregations, the tribunals, and the curia, the cardinals, and the pontifical family. That's not every bishop. That's the ones in Rome.
Jay, cardinal is just a worldly thing. In the Roman Church, you've got bishops and priests, and the Pope is just another.
They're the Roman curia, the curia of Rome. Not every bishop in the world is part of the Roman curia.
All that, you're trying to use these Latin words as though you understand what they mean. All that curia means is the bishops and priests.
They're the tribunals of the Holy See,
yeah,
the Congregation of the Doctrine of Faith.
Yeah, the bishop.
Not every bishop in the world. Not every bishop in the world elects the Pope. The Roman Curia does.
The ones that are elected to do so, do so. And it can be anybody. Some of them can even.
No, it cannot. No, the Roman Curia, according to canon law, is who elects the Pope.
Yes, and if the Roman Curia defects, another bishop replaces them quite clearly, as in Ex Postulatum Officium clearly states, anybody elected by a heretic pope is an invalid cleric.
So you've admitted the defection of the Roman See.
There is no defection. The Roman See currently.
You just said the Roman Curia defected.
I said that, yeah. What I'm saying is that. No, that's what I said. I said all the people that accept Vatican II are not Catholic clerics. End of.
So the Roman See has defected. How are you going to have another pope? Because the Roman Curia elects the Pope.
The Roman See continues to exist in the bodies of those bishops that did not defect. It's very simple.
No, that's not possible because the bishops that did not defect are not the Roman See.
Any bishop is part of the Roman See.
No, they're not. The Roman See is the one in Rome.
Okay, Jay, again, this is where I think you're a bit of
Vatican I.
And you're trying to put your interpretation of things on laws that
are the Roman See is not a guy in Kansas.
I agree with you.
You just said it can be anybody.
No, I didn't say that. You were saying that.
You said any bishop. You said any bishop is the Roman Curia. No, they're not.
Any bishop is part of the Roman Curia.
No, they're not. That's a basic blunder.
Yes, they are.
Your code of canon law in front of you tells you in the ones I listed earlier who elects the Pope and who the Roman Curia is. It's not every episcopate in the world.
No, it's a valid bishops that hold their office. If those offices have been vacated by them not being valid bishops, clearly they can't elect the new Pope. It's not difficult, Jay. Why are you confused?
Because the Roman See is defined, according to Vatican I and according to many other places like Setis Cognitum, to be the see over in Rome that possesses the Roman Curia who elects the Pope. That's what the Roman See and the Holy See and the Apostolic See are.
You know very well that the See does not have to be in Rome. In fact, we had papacies that were in France.
It is invariably tied to Rome. It doesn't have to be in Rome, but it is tied to Rome, and that's what Vatican I says. That's Denzinger.
I did tell you Jay's a liar, an annoying liar, right? See, the papacy was not in Rome for several decades. And in fact, even after it moved to Rome, that's when the whole 2, 3, 4, 3, I think, was the most supposed living popes were on the supposed throne all at once. That's when that started to happen after that. So, for, decades, the Holy See was not in Rome, was not connected to Rome, had nothing to do with Rome. So, he's just flat, outright lying and trying to say that the Holy See is only in Rome. No. The Holy See is composed of any bishop that is left, should the ones in Rome all defect or die or become heretics, as they have, or become apostates, or never were Catholic, that are impostors. Any remaining bishop becomes automatically part of the Holy See that will elect the new Pope. That is just basic, simple, and it doesn't have anything to do with Rome. Rome is a city, it's a physical place. It doesn't mean anything. As I said, it could be in Timbuktu, it could be in, Chile, it could be in Panama, it could be in Australia, God forbid. But, that's what I'm saying. It doesn't matter whether it's in Rome or not. And the people that can elect the Pope are, in theory, yes, when everything is working properly, the cardinals that are in Rome to do so. But that doesn't mean that if those guys all defect, that there isn't a Holy Church left, that there isn't a Catholic Church left, that there aren't valid bishops left. There are. And they automatically would become the people that would elect the Pope. And this has happened, again, before. There was no such thing as cardinals in the year 300 or 400 or 500. So what went on before in the Church is still valid and can happen again. And these things have happened before, backwards and forwards in time. So again, he's just literally making shit up.
Denzinger 1821 to 24 makes this point.
A very simple reason that it's tied to Rome is because Peter the First
Exactly, right.
died and got martyred. So Rome,
of Peter tied to the See of Rome. The seat of Rome can move to Avignon in the Roman Catholic view. I understand that. Right. But it's still successors to Peter.
Notice how here he gets caught out and he says, the Holy See can move to Avignon. I understand that. But they're still successors to Peter. Yes, they are. So what? You see, when he gets caught out, then he tries to confuse things again just to fool the people that I guess are confused or don't know the story properly. They don't know the rules, don't know the truth, really. That's what he does.
Pardon? Say again.
Still successors to Peter wherever the See of Rome is.
Absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. Wherever.
Presently, the See of Rome is the one that's in Rome because that's what the cardinals recognized at the time of Vatican II, and that's what the whole world recognized as the Pope.
I might be understanding. Maybe we're talking past each other. Let me see if I get you right. I'm going to try and explain what I think you're saying, and you tell me if I got it right. You're saying that because the bishops in Rome have all become heretics and apostated, therefore the offices of the apostolic see, whether it's whichever offices are all empty, and therefore you don't have people left that can validly elect the Pope. Is that what you're saying?
I'm going to draw it out for you once again because you didn't listen.
No, mate, I'm just asking a simple question. Did I interpret what you said correctly?
I'm going to draw it out for you again because you didn't hear what I said.
Well, all right.
When we read Denzinger 1821 to 24,
Denzinger.
You do have to accept Denzinger, and this is why you lost the debate. Yes, you do. It's just list of dogmas, you goof.
An interpretation.
That's why you're laughing because you didn't even know that. You came to the debate and you didn't know that.
Interpretation of dogmas by somebody.
It's not an interpretation of dogmas. It's just a list. It's accepted by the whole world as dogma.
No, Jay, you're just.
Yes, it is.
No, you're just making stuff up.
I'm making stuff up.
Yeah.
I'm making up that Denzinger is the sources of Catholic dogma and that it's accepted by the entire world. Are you aware that if you go to the Vatican website in the older encyclicals, they cite this? Did you know that?
The rules of the church are codified in one.
This is the dogmas. I'm not talking about the canons. Canons are part of dogmas. They're not the totality of dogmas.
Canons are the rules of the Catholic Church.
You lost this debate by not knowing what Denzinger was. And all it is list of papal dogmas. It's all papal dogmas and encyclicals.
Dogmas. It's not.
1820. It is. It is.
No, Jay, the laws are here. They're simple to follow. They're easy. One document.
This is the dogmas. That's the canons. Yes. Canons are applications of dogmas.
And notice just here how it says, the canons are the application of dogma. Exactly. So does it matter what's in Denzinger? Sure, if you want to do some research, if you want to know how it came about, if you want to know the origins of how you follow a rule, you can read Denzinger. You can go and read Thomas Aquinas. You can go and read, the letters that were written by Ignatius or what's the other guy? The patristic fathers of the church. You can go and read all that stuff. Sure, it's interesting, it's fun, it's good, great. Is it how you apply the dogma? No. How you apply the dogma is the rules of canon law. So it doesn't matter what's inside Denzinger. How you apply the rules, the dogmatic rules of the Catholic Church is defined, described, and detailed in the canon law of 1917. I don't need to know what's in Denzinger. I don't need to know all the papal encyclicals. That's why the Code of Canon Law was created, so that no one needs to know that stuff unless you're curious and you want to go check it up, and there's nothing wrong with you doing that. But don't you come and tell me that how you apply a rule is in Denzinger. It isn't. It's in the Code of Canon Law of 1918, because that has put together all those documents and decided how to interpret them by the infallible magisterium of the church, and whatever that rule that they've come up with at the end is, that is the rule. End of. It's not Denzinger that tells you how to behave or what to do or what you can or can't do or who can or can't elect the Pope. The Code of Canon Law tells you that. Now, you want to tell me that the Code of Canon Law was built up on the stuff that's in Denzinger and Ludwig Ott and Thomas Aquinas? Sure, no problem with that. So what? You think I have to go and read everything that Thomas Aquinas said before I can interpret canon law, before I can read canon law, before I can see the very black and white, simple definitions, descriptions, and details of canon law? No, I don't. And neither do you. And certainly, neither does Jay. And he knows that. And he said it twice now. But he still hasn't switched on. But he will in a minute. Just watch.
These are dogmas.
The canon is the application
You
of the
need to
dogma.
admit that this is the source of Catholic dogma.
No, you said a very, very correct thing. The canon is the application of the dogmas. And
These are the dogmas. These are the dogmas. These are the dogmas. The Apostolic See cites Denzinger when it cites dogmas. The canon law is citing Denzinger at times.
This is how you use them. End of.
Precisely. That book, the Code of Canon Law, is how you use the dogmas. That book, Code of Canon Law, tells you exactly how you apply the dogmas. What you have to do, what you don't have to do, what you can do, what you can't do. Very simple. One book. One.
There is
You
no
just want a new copy. You don't even know what Denzinger is. I've read through this twice. This is nothing but papal dogmas listed. You're a moron.
This is how you moron. This is how the rules are get used.
Peter is defined according to Vatican I and Satis Cognitum in his successors. The primacy is defined as universal jurisdiction in Vatican I, in Pastor Aeternus, to be very clearly in his successors, to have full immediate jurisdiction in the Holy See through its congregations and its curia and its decisions. So you have to accept the juridical and the disciplinary decisions of the Roman See. The Roman See is the one that's tied to Rome because Peter died in Rome and he established his successors there. That means that prior to Vatican II, the only see that the world accepted and that the curia accepted as the apostolic see was the one in Rome. So in 1950, the only see that the entire world and the Roman Catholic the curia accepted was the one that was actually in Rome. So you have to demonstrate that there was a defection between 1955, 1963, and after the time of Vatican II, because the entire world accepted that as the Roman See. So that is the Roman See, right? Where did the Roman See go in its visible successors and its visible hierarchy? You say it fell to an episcopate that is not in Rome. Where is this visible unity? The easy answer is that it doesn't exist. There is no one holy Catholic apostolic church that exists in the Sedevacantists, because the Sedevacantists are not one. They're fractured into more divisions than the Protestants.
Okay, I think I've already dealt with the whole Avignon, Rome. The Holy See doesn't have to be in Rome, and whoever's left is by automatic succession of apostolic divine right, part of the remaining Holy See. I've already addressed that, but let me address the point where he says, oh, the sedevacantists are all split and they're all arguing with each other and whatever. No. The sedevacantists, and there are various groups, CMRI, IMBC, the guys who follow, what's his name? Bishop Sanborn and so on. So there are different groups that are all sedevacantists. And they all accept that the last valid pope was Pope Pius XII, who died 9th October 1958. All the sedevacantists accept this, all of them. Now, there are some disagreements between various bishops or laymen or priests, and these do not constitute a schism, a split from each other. What's happening is, for example, Bishop Sanborn has run roughshod over some worldly aspects of canon law. In other words, he has claimed to have some jurisdiction over people, over an area, particularly in London, when it's absolutely clear that because there is no valid pope, no bishop has any jurisdiction over anything. And as a matter of fact, various priests can do and have done and have given masses in London, totally ignoring the fact that Bishop Sanborn has said, oh well, if you don't accept my authority, you can't have the sacraments, which is it's illegal. It's not a legal position that he can hold canonically. It's wrong, and it starts to lead into some serious error that becomes more than just error from a worldly perspective, because if he's denying sacraments to people on the basis of, oh, if you don't recognize my jurisdiction, then you can't have the sacraments, that's starting to impinge on divine law. So, there are bishops, well, as far as I know, he's the only one that's making that kind of error or that kind of arrogant decision. And people rightly call them out on it. Laymen, myself specifically, other laymen, and even clergy. But that's, while they know that he's doing an error, they will not necessarily, certainly the clergy will tend to avoid having a public spat about it, most of them anyway, because it just brings scandal to the church and whatever. But it's the same as, when the church was, let's say, whole, we'll say, I don't know, in 1800s or something. If there was some bishop that behaved wrongly, did wrong things, said wrong things, he would be sort of criticized, and he would have warnings, and eventually he would have warnings from the Pope. Now, because there is no Pope, all that can happen is that laymen and other bishops point out his errors. And this does happen and should happen, and it's a healthy thing. That's not to say, even Bishop Sanborn, nobody's trying to say that Bishop Sanborn is not validly ordained or that he's not a valid bishop. He is. He is making some very serious canonical bad choices. Whether you call them errors, whether they're intentional, I don't know. It doesn't really matter. The fact is that it's very obvious he's doing some wrong things. So people point this out. But that's it. There isn't all the schisms that he's talking about. What he does try to conflate is he tries to conflate the sedevacantists with what they call the Old Catholic Church. Now, the Old Catholic Church was basically a group of spies. They were essentially all CIA/FBI informants that were connected to the guy that started the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. They were connected to Lee Harvey Oswald. They were connected to the mafia that, supposedly shot JFK, and the people behind it. So the so-called Old Catholic Church, or what they also were calling themselves wandering bishops, these are a bunch of CIA operatives and deep state people that has nothing to do with the actual real Catholic Church, just try to usurp the name to get some kind of legitimacy. Similarly, what we call trailer park popes, there's some random guy who got his mom and two friends to say that he's the pope, and he lived out his life. I believe he's dead now, pretending to be pope, and then, that's just a guy that's mentally ill, and a couple of people that, I don't know, support his mental illness and don't know any better. But the sedevacantists are all on the same page with regard as to, who was Pope, who wasn't Pope, etc. Um, just because you're a Catholic doesn't mean that you're going to agree on everything that another Catholic says, but we do all follow the magisterium of the Church. And when some of us don't, they get told, they get pointed out, because that's what a Catholic should do. That's a Catholic duty. So again, he's just conflating and lying about who, the splits among the sedevacantists is just nonsensical again.
The sedevacantists are not holy. They don't produce saints. The sedevacantists are not universal. They're not Catholic, because when St. Augustine argued against the Donatists, he argued that universality means the church throughout all the world, consisting of the entire orchimene. The sedevacantist chapels, 300, give me a break, against 1 billion that recognize Francis. Come on.
And here we find out the real nature of J. Dyer. He's obviously somebody who's puts a lot of stock in number of people. It's a good thing Catholics don't, because there was only about 11 scared men hiding that actually started the Catholic Church after Jesus got crucified. But J. Dyer seems to think that if 1 billion people think that 2 + 2 is 9, then it must be 9. No, Jay. Again, if you're a fame whore who's just trying to chase numbers and clicks, yeah, you would think like you do. But the reality, the truth, is the truth. It's objective. It doesn't change. It's always the same. It doesn't matter if there were 7.9 billion people that believed Francis was Pope. He's not Francis. His name is Bergoglio Jose Maria. And he stole the name of one of the coolest saints of the Catholic Church on purpose to try and denigrate it. He is not Pope. He is not Catholic. He is not a clergyman of anything to do with Catholicism. He may be a very high priest in some demonic, sub-denomination of Satanism. I don't know and I don't care. But he's clearly not Pope. And it doesn't matter whether 1.2 billion people have been fooled. There's a lot of people that think the earth is flat. There's a lot of people that can't do 2 + 2. They don't even understand the concept of 2 or plus, or addition or division. It doesn't make them right, Jay. Just like you continually lying and lying again and again and again and again doesn't make your lie true. Reality is what it is, and it doesn't care about your feelings or your lies, and neither do I.
That's not a unified Catholic Church. And number 4, the constituent property, according to Pastor Aeternus of Vatican I, is that the Roman pontiff lives perpetually in his successors until the end of the world. That means that this fundamental constitution of the indefectibility and unity of the church cannot alter or go away before Jesus returns. In your view, it has altered and it has gone away into being something like orthodoxy. That's the irony here, is that if there is a 60+ year acceptance of where we don't have a pope, then actually you're admitting the principle of orthodoxy, that we don't actually need the pope to guarantee the unity and succession of the church.
No, I'm not saying that at all. Again, you're putting words in my mouth and you're conflating different things. Peter is the head of the church, and his successor, whichever valid pope comes after Peter, has primacy of office in the sense that they have the right to create the laws, hire, fire, whatever, do whatever, because the pope has that authority. I've got no problem with that. You're saying that the Roman See was the one in Rome before 1958. Agree with that. I don't have any problem with that. That was the Roman See. Now, the problem is that after 1958, between 62 and 65, Vatican II came out. Vatican II is completely heretical. Therefore, the prudence of the church, prudence is one of the rules that we have to follow as Catholics, clearly states if a guy is heretic, you don't listen to what he said. So why do we go back to 1958? We can certainly say that since 1962, every pope that accepted Vatican II is a heretic. But Vatican II was instituted by Angelo Roncalli, who took over on 28th of October of 1958. And therefore, he's probably apostate too, which is why we ignore him and don't listen to anything he said. And again, this is clear rules of the Catholic Church. There is, it puts the lie to your idea that there has to be a constant living pope for the very simple fact that popes die. And sometimes it takes years before you elect a new
I've already dealt with the vacancy. I dealt with it in multiple places in the video, and you just ignored that. The problem is not a vacancy. The problem is not a vacancy. The problem is that there's a lack of a visible earthly head for 60 plus years, and there can't be another one because the Roman Curia is who elects the Pope. The Roman Curia is the congregations in Rome.
Oh, notice the backtracking. It's not the vacancy that's the problem. Oh, it's the vacancy that's the problem. No, it's not the vacancy that's the problem. It's because it's like a 60-year-long vacancy, and now all the other people that are supposed to be, in the Vatican and valid are not, and that means you can't elect a new pope. Well, that's a lie. You can elect a new pope with the valid bishops that are left. They don't have to be in Rome. There's nothing special about Rome other than that's where Peter died and that's where most of the popes lived. But, the Holy See, as I said, can be in Timbuktu. If the next valid pope decides that he wants the Holy See to be in Cape Town, South Africa, well, guess what? Then that's where the Holy See is going to be. Okay? Simple.
It's quite clear in Mysticia Corporis, Jay, that it clearly states that the
Vatican I says it's a visible earthly head, successor to Peter, the living magisterium until the end.
Yes, we're not at the end. We're busy.
So where's the visible successor?
The visible successor will happen once we have enough bishops.
Where's he been for 60 plus years? How's he going to be?
It doesn't matter how many years, Jay. It can be 1,000
It does matter
years.
because there's nobody to elect him who's a valid.
No. The remaining bishops are clearly.
No, they can't. No, they can't. The canon law is clear who elects it.
He really is a deceptive little snake. Here he's trying to say that canon law is clear on who elects him. Yes. Now, you need to understand that canon law is divided into various parts. There are canonic laws, there are divine law. They don't change. It doesn't matter what anybody or anything says. That is the law, and it stays that way, and it always has been that way, and it always will be that way. Then there are episcopal rules or laws, the rules to run the church. As the church kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger, you had to have certain organizational things done. The church is a hierarchical structure, so there needed to be some way to decide who does what and which office does what, and even new offices were created that didn't exist 1,000 years before that. And this is all just normal running of the worldly side of the church. Now, the church should not be of the world, but it lives in it, and it has to deal with the realities of worldly life. So they said, well, we can't have people flying in from all over the place to vote in the Pope whenever one dies, because some of them died, after only a few years, and then that just causes a whole bunch of travel problems. So what we're going to do, now that we're like big enough and there's enough of us, is the guys in Rome that are cardinals, they're going to be the guys who decide who's the next pope, and there's only so many of them, and blah, blah, blah. And yes, all these rules apply as long as the church continues to run normally. But should, like I keep saying, a nuke or Vatican II hit Rome and wipe them all out, does that mean that the church has defected, that the church no longer exists? No, it doesn't mean that. You revert back to the original old rules. And what were the original old rules? The original old rules were that even people that weren't even priests could vote in a pope, depending on where they were, who they were, and whether they got selected to be the person that could vote a pope. So do you think that in the year 300 you had cardinals? The word didn't exist. They didn't have them. So, are you trying to tell me that what happened in the year 300 doesn't count? See, that's just Protestant arguing. And Jay is a Protestant. He's more than that. He's a rebellious Gnostic. But essentially, Protestants are people who rebel against the Catholic Church. And he has, and he does, and he still thinks like a completely binary thinking Calvinist. Although I don't even think he's a Calvinist. I mean, deep down he knows he's no kind of Christian of any denomination. He's just a liar. And he keeps trying to pretend that, well, what happened in the year 300 doesn't count anymore. Well, no, that's how the church was created. And what happened in the year 300 remains valid today as it did in the year 300. It's just that the situation has changed from a practical point of view. And in the year 1800, you certainly had a lot more people and a lot more bishops all around the world, in parts of the world that we didn't even know existed in the year 300, that are now bishops. And in order to make the running of that more simple and more logical, you created this position of cardinal. If all those cardinals become apostates, well, guess what? they don't get to vote in any new pope. It's not hard. A 5-year-old gets it. Why doesn't Jay? Because, well, he's a bit of an autistic spur. Again, he's also a liar and a deceiver, an intentional liar and deceiver. So he knows what he's doing. There's an ulterior motive to it, which is negative and evil, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, bishops.
You just said canon law is dogma. Canon law decides who elects the Pope. All the people who would elect him are heretics and apostates, on your view.
No, in your view, because all the people. No, in your view, not my view. No, your view, Jay, not my view. The bishops that remain faithful.
You just said they defected at Vatican II.
I'm saying that all the ones who accepted Vatican II defected.
Yeah, and that's the Roman Curia.
Not all of them accepted.
Yes, it is.
No,
name a person from the Roman Curia who didn't accept Vatican II. Name one.
The bishops that remain.
No, a member of the Roman Curia. Name a member of the Roman Curia who didn't.
Again, I think you're
yeah, because you don't have one. Because you don't have one. Because you don't have one.
There is no law at all that says that in fact, we have ex apostolatum.
I listed all the canon laws in the 1917 code that tell you who elects the Roman bishop.
You keep avoiding ex apostolatum officium, which clearly states that
it doesn't matter because it's prior to Vatican I, and Vatican I specifies where the Roman bishop comes from.
That is
I don't have I have no problem with cum ex apostolatus officio.
Well, it clearly states that we've had fake popes, that we will have them again, and that they are completely to be ignored, and anybody they elect is to be ignored.
But that has nothing to do with who elects the Pope. Who elects the Pope in canon law?
Or valid
Roman Curia. Can you name one member of the Roman Curia who didn't sign on to Vatican II?
Listen,
no.
If all of Rome were nuked, right?
Name
in
one.
1960,
Name one. Where's your visible episcopate? Name one.
We have Bishop Sanborn, we have Bishop Selwyn.
They're not members of the Roman Curia.
They are by default.
No, they're not.
Was defective.
No, they're not. You have been demolished because of your pride.
No, it's
you
not.
Spent hours attacking me. You don't know what Denzinger is. You don't know what Vatican I says. You don't know how the Roman Curia elects the Pope.
Again, your autism is showing through, Jay. You're trying
you just call it autism because you got demolished.
It is. It's some point of legalism that is nowhere written down.
Legalism. You just said it's all canon law. You're the one that keeps appealing to canon law. I listed all the canon laws that tell you who elects the Pope, the Roman Curia.
What you're saying is that if a basketball player starts to take a golf club on the court, then we have to accept he's a basketball player. No, he's defected. He's clearly not playing basketball. He's no longer part of the basketball court. You don't
get to decide that. You don't get to make that decision.
I don't make that decision. Canon law does.
Now, let me interject. Here.
Canon law.
Jay, can you explain? Now, we're having an argument about the Roman Curia. I will admit that's not my strong suit. So I'm going to let you, can you explain why those people are not members of the Curia and what the Curia actually is and stuff like that?
Catholic Encyclopedia, look at Roman Curia. Strictly speaking, it is the ensemble of departments or ministries which assist the sovereign pontiff in the government of the universal church. These are the Roman congregations, the tribunals, the offices of the Curia. The congregations, being the highest and most extensive departments of the pontifical government, are treated elsewhere under the Roman congregations. This article deals in particular with the offices of the Curia, the cardinal, and the pontifical family. That is not every bishop. Every bishop is not part of that. He needs there to be successors and bishops who are part of this crew to continue his goofy church.
Again, nonsense. What I should have done here at the time is, but he's just going on autistically, and it's like, it's, sometimes pointless to argue with a rabid dog. What I should have asked him is, tell me, who was the Roman Curia and who were the cardinals in the year 412? There's no such thing. And what went on before cannot be invalidated by what comes after. Similarly, what comes after cannot invalidate what went on before. That is a principle of Roman Catholicism, of Christianity. So he's, again, just lying and making shit up and shouting a lot because that's how he thinks he's going to get his point across. Probably does to his little autist friends.
No, but it doesn't exist. And that's why he can't name one.
Now,
that's
Kurgan,
why named aren't members of the Roman Curia.
Kurgan, why do you disagree with his interpretation there? Or what are your problems with that?
Well, I disagree for the very simple reason that according to canon law, a heretic immediately vacates their office by default. There is nobody needs to say anything. So Jay is correct.
The Roman See can't defect, goofus. That's why your position doesn't work.
Can you let me answer? Let's Rolf.
Go ahead and answer.
So Jay is entirely correct when he says that currently the bishops in the Vatican are all heretics, pedophiles, whatever. They're scum of the earth, as far as I'm concerned. He's right in that. So what he's trying to say, I believe, is that because the original official offices of the church, congregation of the faith, etc., are currently filled by impostors, there is no Roman See, and as such, you cannot elect a new pope. Now, that's absolute nonsense. Of course, if all those offices get nuked, let's say Rome got hit by a nuke instead of Vatican II, which is essentially the same thing. Well, so what? Does that mean that no single bishop on earth is no, obviously.
It's impossible according to Vatican I. This is why he doesn't understand Vatican I.
And here he's lying again, where he's trying to say that Vatican I says that the whole of the offices in the Vatican have to always be there for all time, always. Otherwise, the church has defected. Vatican I says no such thing. Vatican I is online. Please go and look at it, go and read it. And you go ahead and tell me, where does it say that all of the offices of the Vatican have to always be filled by non-impostors at all times, otherwise the church ends? It doesn't. Furthermore, we have saints of the church, and I don't want to make a mistake now, I think it was either St. Ignatius, that, and it's a dogmatic principle of Catholic belief that if there is only one bishop left on earth, that is where the church is. And literally that is, I think, the almost exact words that I think it was St. Ignatius said. St. Ignatius was the guy who, if I remember his name right, he's the guy who walked to Rome for about a year, get eaten by lions because the emperor had condemned him to death. And he did so. While he did so, he wrote letters and people followed him and whatever. And he was one of the biggest saints of the church. And he literally stated canonic law, divine law. It is divine law. It's not just a priestly rule. If all the bishops on earth die except one, then that one is where the church is by default. Again, it's not difficult, and it isn't difficult. And Jay knows this, but he is intentionally just a deceiver. So he'll just keep making lies up.
That's not possible according to the way Vatican I defines the perpetual successors and living magisterium. You have no living magisterium, and that's why you lost this debate. Vatican I makes clear that there's not going to be an end of the vacancy or an end of the Roman See at the end of time.
All right, let him go ahead, Kurgan. Finish your thought, and what's your why is his interpretation of Vatican I not hold water with you?
Because his interpretation of Vatican I is just he's making it up.
Precisely. His interpretation of Vatican I, he's just making it up. That's really the end of it.
There is nowhere that it says that you have to have a living pope at all times and a living curia at all times. It doesn't say that.
I didn't say at all times. I said until the end of time. You're
Notice how he gets caught out in the lie. I say, he's trying to say that there's nowhere in Vatican I that says that you have to have a living pope all the time and that you have to have a living curia all the time in Rome. And he gets caught out and immediately he switches tack. He says, oh, I didn't say that. Notice what he says next, yeah? Saying I'm misquoting him. I didn't misquote him. Watch what he said that does.
Quoting me. I dealt with vacancies in the Apostolic See in multiple sections of the video. Vatican I is not talking about vacancies. Vatican I is talking about living successors in the magisterium of Peter until the end of the world, until the return of Christ.
Now he switches back to the original point, which we've already demolished, which is, you need a perpetual successor of Peter, so you need a pope all the time. There. I didn't say you need it all the time, I just said you need it all the time. Do you see how he switched this position about 4 times, going backwards and forwards whenever you nail him on it? And that's what he does. And that's why I'd said years ago, J. Dyer is a liar. And that is really the sum of it. He is simply a liar.
I've got one more point on that. If you let me reply, I'll reply.
Go ahead. Let him get in. Go ahead.
So, Jay keeps going on about until the return of Jesus Christ. First of all, Jesus Christ has not returned. So, Jay...
groundbreaking argument there. Hey, thank you for letting us know that.
All right, go ahead. Let him get in. Go ahead.
Hold on. We also, quite clearly we're not clairvoyant. We do not know that there isn't going to be another pope at some point in the future before Jesus' return. So again, Jay is just making assumptions. However, we know for a fact that whoever is left must necessarily take on the offices eventually, because it's happened before. We know for a fact, again, the Ex Apostolatum Officium is very clear. Heretic popes are not, relevant. So it doesn't matter the fact that there's a current.
There's no such thing as heretic popes according to Vatican I, so he doesn't even know what he's talking about.
The lies just become more and more outrageous when you corner the rat, isn't it? There are no heretic popes. There have been 40 anti-popes. And of course, what I mean when I say heretic pope, I mean an invalid pope. Somebody who maybe even was valid and then becomes invalid. That becomes what I call a heretic pope. That's quite clearly the definition I'm using here. It's quite obvious. It's quite clear to everybody except Jay, because Jay lies. There have been over 40 anti-popes. So there have been more than 40 instances before 1958, more than 40, where a pope at some point later was, whether he lived, whether he died, after he died, whenever, was declared an anti-pope, i.e. a heretic that was not validly a pope, despite the fact that he might have been assumed to have been valid when he was alive. There have been over 40 of these, so he's absolutely lying when he says there's no such thing as heretic popes. He's talking nonsense, and he is interpreting falsely what Vatican I says. What Vatican I says, which is what every Catholic believes, is that no actual valid pope can be heretic. Yes, that's true, and that's what I'm saying. If you're a heretic, you're not a pope. It's kind of tautology, it's obvious. If you're not a basketball player, well, you're not a basketball player, Like if you're not a pope, you're not a pope. So, again, and he's talking absolute nonsense when he says that Vatican I says there can be no heretic popes. What Vatican I is saying is that the pope is the pope. That doesn't mean there haven't been fake popes. That doesn't mean there haven't been imposters before. All of that's happened before. So he's just lying outright. The lies are coming faster and faster and in a more anxious manner because he's been cornered.
About Session 3, Section 1 says that the Constitution of the Church will continue in its present form until the end of the world, until the return of Jesus. If we skip down.
Okay, I haven't actually finished. I wanted to.
All right, go ahead. Let him finish. Now, we do have no disagreement that Jesus has not returned to the earth. That's right. Okay. All right. So we do have agreement on that. Okay. Now, go ahead, Kurgan. Finish up your thought. I know Jay's chomping at the bit to get in some more, but go ahead.
I mean, again, if Jesus has not returned, the church has not ended. We've not come to end of times. However, there are plenty of prophecies in Catholic thought, and I believe also there is a certain interpretation of Revelation, which quite clearly state that at the end, even the head of the seat, the leaders of the church, even that is going to become the seat of Satan. So again, what we're seeing here is sort of all on course.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that, because La Salette is prior to Vatican I. Vatican I negates the possibility of La Salette being true, because Vatican I says that the see of Peter will continue until the end. Session 4, Section 3 says that the Constitution of the Church as it is will continue until the end of time. We're not at the end of time, so the Constitution of the Church with living visible successors in the office of Peter will continue until the end of time.
You don't know what the end of time is?
Yes, we do.
No, you don't, Jay.
So the end of time, wait, the end of time's defined as Jesus coming back, right?
That's the end of. You said out of your own mouth that Jesus hasn't returned. So where is the essential constitution of the Roman Church according to Vatican I at the present?
Jay, if Jesus returns tomorrow, okay, let's say Jesus returns tomorrow.
Where is the essential constitution of the Roman Catholic Church presently?
Again, let me finish my thought. If Jesus,
you had your talk. You had your talk.
No, I'm answering your question. Let me answer the question.
Go ahead. Let him. Go ahead.
So, if Jesus returns tomorrow, then quite clearly, what's happened up till now is clear evidence that the church got, kind of almost destroyed. We're told that in the end days, even the elect would eventually defect if it wasn't for the fact that Jesus returns.
Yeah, but the problem is that if we're going to have that view, it has to be the Roman See that doesn't defect.
Oh, that's a lie. It isn't the Roman See that doesn't defect. It is whoever doesn't defect. That's just shit he made up there and then on the spur of the moment. There is no such statement in Vatican I that says that at the end of times, the only people that don't defect are the people in the Roman See. That is absolute bullshit that Jay just made up because, again, he's a cornered rat.
Because Vatican I is very clear that the Roman See cannot defect, and you keep switching back and forth between saying it has and it hasn't to maintain the nonsense of your position.
I'm very clear on it, Jay. Listen up, very clear. What was the Roman See in 1957? They have all become the guys that were at that time in the Vatican.
That's heresy. That's why you're a heretic, because Vatican I says that it can't defect.
No,
the Holy See can't defect.
Let me finish. The ones in 1957 that were currently in the Vatican, I don't know that every one of them defected. I can't know that. What I do know is that by 1965, anybody who did not reject Vatican II was de facto a heretic. All right. The ones that did not do that did not defect. And no, it's very simple.
You couldn't name a single member of the Roman Curia who could even elect another pope. It doesn't matter because you're not getting the argument of what Vatican I says that the office of Peter is.
Oh, again, here we see Jay's continuous, he's only got one play in his book, and that is just keep repeating the same nonsense enough times and people believe you. Vatican I doesn't say what he's saying it says. That's a J. Dyer made up bullshit interpretation of Vatican I. It doesn't say that. Read it for yourselves. Go look it up. Jay is just outright lying here, okay? Just reminding you every time he lies about what Vatican I says, I'm going to say he's lying because it doesn't say that. And you can read it yourself. Don't take my word for it. Go read it.
I recognize, and the people at Vatican I recognize that there have been vacancies in antipopes. That has nothing to do with the point of the argument. The point of the argument is that the essential constitution of the church, in terms of its indefectibility, in terms of the constitution of what makes up Peter and his office, right? Do I need to list them for you again? I can.
No, but that's your interpretation. It's not what it says.
It's not. It's directly from Vatican I. It's directly from Satis Cognitum. It's directly from Denzinger, 1821 to 24. Denzinger is citing Pius IX, you clown.
It doesn't matter what you're saying, Jay. That's not what it
doesn't matter because all I'm doing is citing your dogmas.
You're not actually quoting the document. You're making shit up. So.
No.
See, that's it. He's just making shit up. And he says, no, yes, he is. He's just making shit up. And you can check it out for yourself. Now, I suppose my error throughout this debate, inverted commas, is that I didn't call him out on his absolute lies every single time. And I should have done. But it was already a bum fight as it is. And what's the point? Most people don't even know what we're discussing anyways. But I thought in my naivete perhaps that the people who do know the stuff or look it up or who care to look it up would figure out very quickly that Jay is just making shit up. We're now 3 years after COVID, so I know that most people are complete fucking morons. I wouldn't do that anyway. But so I didn't bother to necessarily swat back every single one of his lies. I just I did just there. I just said, well, you're just making shit up, because he is. And what else is there to say when somebody's doing that? There's really no point in discussing anything further with them.
Well, do I need to just read Denzinger for you?
I don't care about Denzinger.
I love it when you say that. Keep saying this because it's nothing but papal quotes.
The rules get.
You don't care about what the papal quotes are.
The rules get applied according to canon law, not according.
Now, let me ask you that this has been a point of contention. Why do you not care about Denzinger? I'll admit this.
He doesn't know what it is. He didn't even. No. He thought it was Ludwig Denzinger.
Question, Jay. Let me answer.
Go ahead, Kurgan. Why do you not care about this book?
I don't, because that book is a collection of supposed dogmatic beliefs of the church.
Supposed dogmatic.
All right, let him go ahead. Let him finish. Go ahead.
Hey, can't you control yourself? Come on, man.
And no, he can't control himself. He's a very emotional, small little man, and so he can't control himself. That's just, I thought I'd let you know.
Go ahead, finish.
So, it's a collection of theological thought, dogmas, whatever, which has interpretations to it. Now,
no, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. That's a lie.
Stop.
That's incorrect. You're wrong. It doesn't have any interpretations.
Wait your turn, mate.
Go ahead.
Now, all the dogmas of the Catholic Church are collated into a set of rules right here.
No, they're not.
Code of Canon Law of 19...
You are an idiot.
Again, don't take my word for it. If you got the book, the Code of Canon Law, it'll tell you at the front briefly. But you can research this online, okay? Cardinal Gasperi and a team of cardinals and bishops went through thousands of documents to make sure that there was no contradiction and nothing that was interpreted wrong or that would contradict one of the rules of the church somewhere in the 2,000-year history of it. They went through literally thousands of documents to put the Code of Canon Law together. So it absolutely encompasses and summarizes all of the dogmas of the Catholic Church from the year 0 to the year 1917. It absolutely does that. Don't take my word for it. Certainly don't take Jay's word for it. Go look it up. Go look it up who Cardinal Gasperi was. Go look up how many documents they researched to create the Code of Canon Law. And then how many years after it was put out, so in between 1917 and 1958, yeah, that's 41 years, there was one tiny change made to one Code of Canon Law by Pope Pius XII himself. That's it. And in all those 41 years, what the church did is they asked clergy and people who studied in universities who studied things like canon law and so on, to send in any questions they had, any doubts they had, any potential contradictions that they found. And guess what? They had done such a good job that nothing changed apart from the tiny change to Part 2 of Canon 1099 by Pope Pius XII in 41 years. Why do I say 41? Well, because after that, we only had fake popes, and after that, only fake clergy and so on. But, it took them another 12, 50, until 83 for them to create a completely fake, absurd, illogical, doesn't stand up on its own logic, fake Code of Canon Law of 1983. Why? Well, because they had to do something about the Code of Canon Law of 1917, right? Otherwise, they were just proven all to be heretics by it. So they had to try and mask that up. But that's what it is. So he's absolutely lying when he says that the dogma of the church are not done by canon law. And you'll see it in a minute again.
How
you don't even know what dogma as opposed
All
to
right, let him finish. Go ahead.
So the rules of the Catholic Church get applied according to this book and this book only. This is the book that explains how the laws of the church actually work. Regardless of your personal interpretation of this or that dogma, those are the rules. And it's a very clear document. So it doesn't matter if Jay believes this or that other thing. You follow the rules of canon law. End of.
All right. So, now go ahead, Jay.
This is what we get when we get a guy who makes videos channeling aliens and talking about aliens blowing up Mars. This is literally what he believes. On his website, he believes in past life regression therapy, which means that he believes in reincarnation, which is not a Catholic teaching at all. It's actually heresy. And everybody in the Catholic world, whether they're Novus Ordo or Trad, would know that Denzinger is not interpretations of dogma. It's just a list of Catholic dogmas. It's not opinions. It has no opinions in it whatsoever. It's merely a list of the papally approved dogmas.
How do you apply those dogmas?
The debate is actually over.
How do you apply those dogmas?
I'm done because the debate is over. I don't have a problem. I cited canon law at the beginning of the debate. I listed you all the canons. I listed you all the canons that tell you how the Pope is elected.
How do you apply the dogmas of the church, Jay?
Now pay attention to what's coming next, because remember what I asked him here? How do you apply the dogmas of the Catholic Church, Jay? Pay attention to what happens. Pay deep attention. In fact, I might even slow it down so you can see his face in slow-mo.
They're called canon law.
Exactly. Thank you. So that's the only.
No! 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 No!
No, it's not. No, it's not. And no Catholic in the world will say what you're saying.
Now, let me ask you, Kurgan, he mentioned, he called you a heretic for some of your beliefs there, if you wanted to respond to that and the alien stuff. And all
yeah, that. Well, a lot of, the alien stuff, whatever. I mean, Jay's made videos
from reincarnation,
about being on weed, whatever, like
from reincarnation.
But personal.
You channel UFOs and you want to call me out for weed? You channel UFOs.
Hold on. Let me answer the question. Again, why are you interrupting? Why are you so scared? Let me answer the question.
And just as an aside here, he's now been nailed to the wall, right? Because he had to admit that how you apply the dogmas of the Catholic Church is by canon law. So now he's just trying to divert to something else and, trying to say I'm a heretic because of the reincarnation on my blog, or, UFO channel UFOs. I've never said I've channeled UFOs, but he's again just trying to divert to something else because he's been cornered like a rat. That's just in case you'd missed that, I thought I'd point it out.
I told you I would demolish
Be
you.
quiet. Control
I
yourself.
told you I would
You're
demolish you.
emotionally incontinent. Relax. So, sorry, Rolf. What was the question?
So reincarnation. He mentioned the alien. I was just letting you respond. Since he
on
brought
my website, like I said, I've only officially become Catholic in 2017. So there's a bunch of stuff there. I mean, I lived like a fucking weird, heretic most of my life. So all the posts and whatever that I've done before the 25th of May of 2017 probably include a bunch of heretic stuff.
So you renounce that? Is that what you're saying?
So no, I'm saying that those belief systems have changed since they've evolved. Right. I evolved as a human being. Now, with regard to reincarnation, I know that the Catholic Church sees reincarnation as a heretic sort of thing. And again, this is a finer point that would probably take a few hours to cover, so it's not going to get covered here. And I know Jay will attack this position, but there are ways that you could possibly accept that there is some form of reincarnation, although it goes against the sort of dogmatic beliefs of the church, and it does so for very good reasons. Like, for example, right at the beginning of the video, Jay said that there is nobody that can, even martyrs fall outside of the church, regardless of whether they even die for the church. Let me just read you a quote from one of the remaining valid priests that answered the question I asked him, verbatim. Yes, you're right in thinking about salvation and baptism of desire and of blood. These are exceptions, not the general rule, and do not contradict the dogma of extra ecclesiam nulla salvis. Outside of the church, nobody can be saved. This dogma is always true, but we have to consider how exactly someone can belong to the church. The possibility does exist that someone doesn't belong to the body of the church in foro externo, in the public outside form, but belongs to the church in foro interno, in God's conscience. And in this situation, it is not of his own fault. Such a person can be saved. So, again, refuting what he's, autistically trying to say.
All right, go ahead, Jay.
I think it's just total nonsense. I'm done. I don't have anything else to say.
All right, fair enough. You don't have any final thoughts?
Yeah, I like to close my debate.
Go ahead. And I'll give Kurgan the last. Go ahead.
Okay. So I began the debate by talking about the 1917 Code of Canon Law. He likes to cite this as if that is the dogma.
And notice how he lies again. I didn't say that the Code of Canon Law is the dogmas. I said that all the dogmas up to 1917 are included in the Code of Canon Law, because the Code of Canon Law is how you apply the dogmas. Therefore, ergo sum, it is impossible for you to have a Code of Canon Law unless those laws are based on the dogmas within it. In other words, the Code of Canon Law contains all of the dogma of the Catholic Church up to and including the year 1917. And that it does do. It's not the dogmas, it's how you apply the dogmas. Therefore, you don't need to know what the dogmas are. You don't need to go and read up 2,000 years of documented history about how some specific rule of the church gets applied and why and whatever. It's all in that one book. That's why it was done. That's why it was created. It's the most vetted document on earth, bar none. That's why the church did it. So, again, Jay, stop lying.
That's not the dogma. The dogmas are the dogmas. The canon law is the application of dogmas. That's two different things.
And notice how here he has to admit the correct thing, which is dogmas are one thing, canon law is the application of the dogmas. That's right, it is. So tell me, do you need to know the dogmas? If you just follow canon law, are you not applying the dogmas correctly? Yes, you are, and you know that. And that's why your whole debate is absolute bullshit. And your, I read Denzinger twice, means absolutely nothing. All you need to do is read canon law. Then if you're curious, you can go and read Denzinger, or Ludwig, or Thomas Aquinas. But how you apply dogmas is canon law. And you notice he's had to admit that. So he has absolutely, completely lost the debate. Thank you.
Anybody in the world of Catholicism who's been there for more than a year or two should know in Catholic theology that the sources of Catholic dogma is not an interpretation of the opinions of any guy. It's not the interpretation of the opinions of Ludwig Ott or Heinrich Denzinger. It's just a list of papally approved dogmas. The Vatican has cited this document. All Catholic theologians in the world will cite that as the sources of Catholic dogma. It can be found at any traditional website that sells Catholic books, whether it's the SSPX or the Sedevacantism. I got mine from Seda Chapels.
Yes, great. And so what? Who cares? Does it matter what's in Denzinger in order for you to simply follow canon law? Do you need to know what's in Denzinger to follow canon law? No, you don't. Is canon law based on the stuff that's in Denzinger? Sure. So what? Do you need to read an 800-page book called Denzinger, written by a guy called Denzinger, in order to actually follow canon law? No, you don't. For some reason, Jay wants to pretend he doesn't understand this. He does. He's been caught out. He's been proven to be an autistic little spurg who lies, and so he's trying to, again, confuse the waters, which is his only play.
So I cited multiple canons that tell you that the Roman Pontiff 149, 218, 219, 154 through 160, 230 to 241 in the 1917 Code of Canon Law, as well as 162, 164, 165, 180 on, are very clear what the Roman Curia is, who comprises it, that they elect the Pope, and that they alone elect and determine who the Pope is, and not anyone else in the world.
Again, more lies. Yes, the Code of Canon Law tells you who are the cardinals that can vote and blah, 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 blah. It does not say that no one else in the world can do that. Because Roman law, you apply the positive, and if there is a negative, it is logically intuited by what the positive is. So the positive says, church law has changed. Church law has said that now we have X amount of cardinals. That was 70, I believe. Then it got changed by the fake popes to more. Then it got changed to like, oh, people over a certain age can't vote by the fake popes. Anyways, those are church rules. And those are the rules that apply when everything is flowing normally. If a nuke hits Rome and there is no more Rome, the whole of the city is gone and everyone in it is gone, well, guess what? Then you revert to whatever happened before in the church, because there is absolutely nothing in canon law that says that you can't do that. In fact, it is canonically, dogmatically, emphatically a rule of Catholicism that whatever went on before is not invalidated by what comes after, and vice versa. What comes after cannot invalidate what happened before. So, did you have cardinals in the year 600? No. Did the people that voted popes have to be in Rome? No. We know this because it's happened before. People have voted a number of popes when they were not in Rome at all, including the Pope wasn't in Rome. So we know that's happened. That can't be invalidated. We also know that cardinals didn't used to exist. In fact, some of the people that voted Pope weren't even priests at certain times in history. So again, if that happened before, it can happen again. It's really quite simple. And the only reason that people get confused because people like J. Dyer pretend that canon law is Anglo-Saxon law. It's not. It's Roman law, which is a completely different setting. It is principle before detail, and the detail is based on logic and reason, and not on what some judge decided 200 years ago and then that forever and ever that's got to be the law from here on. That's nonsense. That's Anglo-Saxon nonsensical ways of applying rules and laws. It is not Roman law, and only people like J. Dyer try and confuse people by pretending that that what I've said is not how it is. It is how it is. But Jay knows this because he is a liar.
And he calls that dogma, then he needs to stick to the 1917 code, which says that's who elects the Pope. I went on to talk about Denzinger in other places, such as 1821 to 24. I'm glad he keeps saying that Denzinger doesn't matter because it just buries him deeper and deeper into his hole. I mentioned essentially that the indefectibility of the church is described in Pastor Eternus, which is the decree of Vatican I, as well as if you look at Denzinger 1821 to 24, that is the specific section of Pastor Aeternus, which if he had known what Denzinger was, he would know that's what that is. The very thing that he pulled up a minute ago, his papers of Vatican I.
Let's pull up Denzinger 1821 to 1824, shall we? Go ahead and pause the video and read it. And tell me if anywhere in there do you see that it says that you have to have the Pope, all of the officers in the Vatican, forming the Holy See, all forever, never having any interruptions in between them. Or that it says that if those guys get nuked, that's the end of the Catholic Church, which is what he's trying to say. It doesn't say that. As usual, Jay is just trying to throw as much random crap at the wall and hopefully no one will check it. Well, here it is. Read it for yourselves.
The church is indefectible in the Roman Catholic system. The church is in perpetuity. The church is public and visible. It is public and visible according to its Petrine office. This Petrine office is the source of unity. Can there be vacancies? Absolutely. Can there be anti-popes? Absolutely. Can there be a vacancy such that the fundamental constitution and unity of the church changes? No. That's why Vatican I is very clear, and it doesn't matter what pre-Vatican I Marian prophecy said about the defection of Rome, because Vatican denied those things. Vatican I says that the perpetuity of the successors of Peter, his primacy, all of those elements that are listed in Vatican I in Satis Cognitum, the visible headship, which he denied in his first rebuttal on earth, that visible headship continues to the end of the world. It's not saying that there's no period of vacancy.
Oh, so it doesn't say that there's no period of vacancy, both of the Roman Curia, of the Pope, all of the above. It doesn't say that. Oh, I'm glad you finally had to admit that, because it doesn't say that, does it, Jay? And that's what you've been trying to pretend that it says up until now. But it doesn't.
But when the Roman Curia elects a successor, that is under the charism of infallibility.
If valid cardinals and valid bishops that are allowed to vote to elect a pope validly vote to elect a pope, and that pope is a pope that can be pope, i.e. it's validly possible for him to become pope, then yes, what's happened there is infallible. If, however, invalid heretics pretending to be Catholics elect another invalid heretic pretending to be a Catholic, then that's not infallible. That's not a pope, and those are not bishops, and they're not cardinals. Again, it's not difficult to understand. Valid popes are valid. Invalid popes are not popes. And it's happened over 40 times before 1958, as I keep telling you.
You don't have the right and the authority to judge the decisions of the Roman Curia as an individual lay Catholic.
And once again, no one is doing that. No sedevacantist, no lay Catholic is judging the Roman Curia. Every lay Catholic has the duty to point out heretics. And we know they're heretics because the Code of Canon Law tells us how and when such heretics appear and what constitutes them being heretics. And it's in Code 188, Part 4, which is very simple, easy, and obvious to understand even for a small child. When somebody publicly defects from the Catholic faith, and especially when they do so notoriously and pertinaciously, as they have done for over 60 years, I think that's pretty pertinacious. Well, guess what? They're public heretics that have denounced the faith They are not Catholic. So no one has to listen to anything they say. They're irrelevant to any Catholic. Because the magisterium of the church tells us that's what we must do. So we do.
So if we were to be concise, I would say that the sedevacantists, sedevacantists theory is a theory, as John says in his book, the book that I was covering, on defection. It's a theory on the defection of the Roman See. But if the Roman See has in any sense defected, then Vatican I is not true. If Vatican I is not true, then neither is Roman Catholicism. So I would just direct people to my good friend who we led out of sedevacantism, John Pontrello, who has the excellent book, if you want to read more on this, The Sedevacantist Delusion, which is what my video was about. My video was directed against Feeneites particularly.
And of course, I have done a takedown of John Pontrello in my book, Reclaiming the Catholic Church, because John Pontrello is an illogical, also liar, knowing liar. And he's another one of these guys who's just after the fame of being with the most, I don't know, well-known church. I don't know. They're into these numbers games. And yes, although Jay didn't specifically state that, his original video was against Feeneites. You can sort of tell that by reading between the lines, although he lied when he said, oh, that's what it was against the Dimon brothers. It was, but he didn't say that in the video. He just said it was like against sedevacantism in general. The Dimon brothers have got a lot of good stuff. Unfortunately, the Dimon brothers are heretic. They get almost everything right, except for two things. They don't believe in baptism of desire or baptism of blood, which are renowned things that even in the Code of Canon Law clearly indicates are real things that do exist. And because they reject that, they then reject all the actual valid bishops and all the valid priests that, as they should, because they are proper Catholic bishops and priests, who do recognize baptism of desire and baptism of blood, and as such become heretics because they don't recognize any authority of any bishop or of any priest anywhere on earth. So, and they're not bishops, they're not priests. So, according to their own rules, then the church has ended. So Feeneites are, they are wrong. Dimon brothers are wrong. They get almost everything else right. But unfortunately, this flaw in their baptism of desire and baptism of blood means that they get everything else wrong. So that's about them, and that's as far as it goes. And by the way, the Feeneites are not the biggest group online. They're not at all. They just have a website that is frequented by a lot of sedevacantists because a lot of the other stuff they've got on there is valid. Unfortunately, they make that error, which puts them into the heretic class, but that's neither here nor there as far as the argument between myself and Jay went.
Not the other groups of sedevacantists who affirm baptism of desire. I don't really care about baptism of desire versus Feeneites in the Roman Catholic system. That video was directed against the largest online group of sedevacantists and their support of Feeneism. There is no one holy Catholic and apostolic unity that exists amongst the sedevacantists. And I would encourage anybody who thinks that there is to go experience the world of sedevacantism and see if you actually see that visible unity there. You will not find, again, the four marks of the church. There will not be holiness. You will find nothing but squabbling and picking each other apart over nonsense, splitting more than the Protestants do. You will find no holiness, no saints. Where are the sedevacantist saints? They ought to be blasting light rays from their eyes if they're the true church. But what do we see in those groups? We see episcopi vagantes, wandering bishops of spooks, kooks.
And again, as he now admits what I told you before, that he tries to blend in episcopis vagantes, wandering bishops, which I told you, and he knows they're spooks and kooks, he says so himself, with sedevacantists. Absolute rubbish, complete nonsense. These so-called episcopes vagantes, these wandering bishops, are not Catholics. They're not ordained by anybody validly. They are literally just CIA plans. He knows that because he's done whole videos on this stuff. The sedevacantists do have a very consistent position. They do all respect each other. They refer people to each other. They may have slight differences here and there on some interpretation of this or that
doctrine or whatever, but they all follow canon law, except for Bishop Sanborn, who is currently in error on canon law, in mostly in a worldly respect, but it is sort of getting worse. The CMRI and the IMBC, they all sort of recognize each other. There is no squabbling, and amongst the lay people, we go to church. I've been to churches in England, in Belgium, in Italy, and we've had people from other countries, in France, we've had people from Finland, from all over the world, and there is no squabbling whatsoever. The lay people all understand what sedevacantism is. The priests and bishops of sedevacantists are very well educated people that understand not just the whole all the stuff behind the theology, but on a human level, very, very personable people. There is no squabbling as far as I can tell. There is a lot of squabbling in the fake trailer trash popes of the Episcopis Vagantis that J. Dyer likes to hang out with. And then this nonsensical thing, or where are their saints? You see, this shows you he's still a Calvinist, one of those people that believes in the rapture. It's saints come about when and if they are saints. And saints come about when and if the Holy See is there to actually say, well, this guy was a saint, and there has to be an investigation, and there's a whole process before somebody can become a saint. And in fact, since 1958, all the saints that have been proclaimed saints by the so-called, fake popes, those are not necessarily saints at all. In fact, they're trying to make every one of the past fake popes saints. Clearly they're not, because they were heretics. They weren't even Catholic. So, it doesn't matter. There's plenty of saints in the Catholic Church. We should have beams of light streaming from our eyes. I think Jay is confusing, Catholicism and Superman comic books. I don't know. That's about his level of theological understanding, so it wouldn't surprise me.
And disinformation. And I was in that world. I know what the sedevacantist world is like. Many of those bishops are complete frauds and kooks, like Archbishop Tuke himself, who many of these people claim to have their apostolic lineage from. Tuke was a kook, quite literally. The only sedevacantist guy coming out of Vatican II that a lot of these people claim their lineage from. This guy was actually insane. So,
and again, if you go online and you research this properly, Jay is again trying to muddy the waters. Now, Bishop Tuck, towards the end of his life, seemed to possibly have gone a little bit off the rails. But that's irrelevant, because when he ordained other bishops, he was fully compos mentis. There were people there that witnessed this. So the ordinations that Bishop Tuck did before, he whatever went a little bit sideways, there's nothing wrong with that. And the Catholic Church has very clear rules on this, and they were followed. So all the ordination that Bishop Tuck did are absolutely valid, and no one can say otherwise. And I believe that Father Anthony Cicada made a whole, he's passed away now, but he wrote extensively on this. And so if you want to go look it up there, you can find all the details. But people like J. Dyer, as I said, they try to confuse the water. So what they do, they mix in CIA operatives that have got nothing to do with sedevacantism with a valid, proper bishop. He was a Catholic bishop who then decided that sedevacantism was the correct way to go, and he ordained other people that, by the way, had decided sedevacantism was the way to go long before that, like Father, he's got a long name, Deloriers. The guy who wrote the Cassichankum theory, and he was ordained a bishop by Bishop Tuck, before Bishop Tuck sort of like became something that perhaps wasn't as reliable or got excommunicated or whatever it was. But again, I forget the details of that, because I've read them on the Father Cicada's commentary and with all the proof of it, and it was like, oh, it's a non-issue. It's just, again, deceivers trying to deceive you. So whenever I come across that stuff, once I've satisfied myself what the truth is, I don't bother really with the details. And that's what Jay is trying to do. He's trying to say that the CIA's kooks, or the mentally invalid trailer trash fake popes,
are sedevacantists. That's what sedevacantism is, and it isn't. It's absolute nonsense. These people have been around since the 60s. They've created proper seminaries. They've got proper chapels. The IMBC in Turin has been around for literally since the 70s, that they've had physical buildings, but the people that constitute who they were around before that. So it's just, again, Jay lying, intentionally trying to confuse the waters to pretend that he's correct. He's a liar. That's what he does.
It doesn't possess Catholicity in terms of universality. There's no universality in this tiny movement. And he says, oh, there's 300 chapels. So what? 300 chapels is nothing compared to the billion people who accept Francis in Rome.
Again, he repeats the numbers. Apparently, Jay thinks that the majority is right. And if the majority thinks that 2 plus 2 is 9, well, then I guess J. Dyer is going to say that 2 plus 2 is 9, which is, of course, nonsense. And again, we've had that demonstrated in the last 3 years. The majority of people doing very silly things for very silly reasons because they can't think properly. Again, the whole of Catholicism was started by 11 scared men. And actually, the first people that saw Jesus when he was, when he was resurrected, were women, which were supposed to be invalid witnesses. And it took 2 women to make the same testimony as 1 man back then. So again, God chooses his tools, and he picks usually broken ones to prove that, he can do anything with anybody. So why Jay is fixated on, oh, well, there's 1.2 billion people. So what? There's probably 6 billion people or 7 billion people that can't do calculus. That doesn't mean that they're right either. So what? It's because he's a fame whore. That's the whole point of J. Dyer. That's what people don't understand. His whole reason for doing all of this and going online and talking about orthodoxy or anything else is because he wants to be famous. And he tried to do that with the Hollywood Insider and the CIA spooks, and it all flopped. But then he decided, oh, well, I'm going to be an orthobro, and all the autistic fake orthodox people decided, oh, well, yeah, he's clever. And no, he's not. He's an intellectual pygmy, and quite frankly, it should be obvious by now if you've got all the way through this video.
So that's not the Catholic Church. You aren't in the Catholic Church. You're in a Donatist schismatic sect.
Oh, again, just notice how he just throws in these words. You're in a Donatist sect. No, Donatism is where people that believe that the priest has to be infallible and perfect in order for you to be able to accept the sacraments of them. No, that's not the case. If a priest is validly ordained, in other words, he's a valid priest, and he commits some horrific act, let's just say, I don't know, he's raped a little kid in the back of the church 5 minutes before he does the mass, but he is a valid priest, right? And he does a valid mass, so he hasn't, even if he had, let's say he's raped a little kid and he's desecrated the host, unbeknownst to you, you don't know that, and you go and take his mass, which is done properly, but with a host that has been corrupted, and he is a child rapist. You have no sin in that mass. You're completely ignorant of what this priest has done, and you take this corrupted host, with no bad intention, not knowing that the host has been corrupted. You have no sin. You have no fault. Now, Donatists say that, well, if the priest is doing that, and you've taken that host, and you're sinful as well, and you're corrupt. No, God is not a lawyer that says, aha, you didn't know, but you still took the bad host, so you're going to hell. That's not how it works. So Donatism is a heresy. And he says, oh, you're a Donatist sect. No, we're not. We're absolutely not saying that priests have to be perfect or whatever. Of course, if you become aware that a priest is a child rapist, then you absolutely, shun him. And I say that because, YouTube. In the old days, of course, a priest that raped a child would be taken to a bog, given a few minutes to say his last prayers, and then he would be hung from a tree or drowned in the bog. And that would be the last of it. And the kid he raped would usually be a witness, so that the men around that would be able to teach and show the child that we care about you and this is why we're doing this, because justice has to be served. And of course, the Catholic Church believes in the death penalty. We also believe in the rule of law and so on. So, you know, if you do know that a priest is doing something wrong or is incorrect, then obviously you avoid him or you chastise him or you do what is required to do in order to correct the issue. But if you're unaware of it, you have no sin. We're not Donatists. Sedevacantists are not Donatists. But he is, again, straw man trying to throw that label on, see what sticks. That's what he does.
And universality is not there.
Again, this nonsense of universality is not there. Of course it's there. Now, the size of the church doesn't matter. Is it visible? Yes. Is it more visible than in the year 200? Yes. Or in the year 300? Yes. Or in the year 400? Yes. Or in the year 500? Yes. Or, for that matter, in the year 1000? Yes, it is, because of the internet. So it's far more visible than it's been for most of the life of the church. Point number one. Point number two, is it universal? Yes, it is, because all the sedevacantists, which have valid priests and valid bishops, all believe the same things. They all follow the rule of canon law. They all follow the dogma of the church. They're all Catholics. So that is the universality. Oh, but it's much smaller than it used to be. So what? Do you not read your Bible? The road to hell is wide and well traveled. The road to salvation is narrow, hard, and only a few people actually take it. Where's the dichotomy here? There isn't one.
And it's not apostolic because the apostolic see, according to Vatican I, continues in perpetuity with all of its constituent properties of Peter, primacy, living Roman pontiff, and connected to the seat of Rome for all eternity until Christ returns, until the end of time, until he brings into time eternity, right?
Again, he just absolutely lied there because Vatican I does not say that you have to have a priest at all time with the seat of all the other offices in Rome. It doesn't say that. That's a J. Dyer made up bullshit lie. So that's nonsense. It absolutely does have apostolic authority because the bishops, there are sedevacantist bishops, have all been validly ordained at their time when they were ordained. They were validly ordained as priests. They were validly ordained as bishops. Therefore, all that apostolic means is that the apostolic succession has gone from valid apostle to valid bishop to valid bishop to valid bishop to valid bishop, and so on, right up to now. In fact, sedevacantists are the only people that actually have apostolic succession. No Protestant has it. The so-called Eastern Orthodox don't have it because all the so-called bishops of Eastern Orthodoxy were political appointees under Russia and Greece as well before that. So they do not have apostolic continuity. Potentially, maybe a few Greek bishops on Mount Athos might. I don't know. I haven't investigated that. Potentially. But they're schismatics because they have, not... So they've ignored Rome for centuries. Although, again, there potentially could be some bishops on Mount Athos that recognize the sedevacantic position and recognize at least potentially the office of the Pope, even when there was a valid Pope. So potentially there might be a few Eastern Orthodox in Greece, certainly not the Soviet ones, not the Russian ones, not the Ukrainian ones, that might be somewhat valid. But certainly no Protestant is, and certainly no Novus Ordo so-called bishop is, because they're heretics. They've broken the apostolic chain. The only apostolic church left on earth that is for certain has got apostolic continuity is sedevacantism. That's a fact. So, he can try and argue that till it goes blue in the face, and there's no way he can prove that there's apostolic continuity anywhere else other than in the sedevacantist churches.
So that's there according to Vatican I. I already listed the sessions and the sections. And so not only does sedevacantism and sedepravationism fail to achieve its end, it actually verges into, on the one hand, affirming a union with an empty seat, a union with a headless body. And it's very ironic that he calls himself the Kurgan when, as he pointed out, that's the headless guy in the Highlander. He gets his head chopped off. Well, that's very ironic because the whole series of the sedevacantist world is a fractured bunch of fringe groups with no head. So I think that that's very ironic. It's a fitting name for him.
Well, it's kind of almost funny. I didn't name myself the Kurgan. It's a name that was given to me by others, people that used to follow Voxday's blog, and I used to comment on there, and they just gave me that nickname. They also threw me into this Facebook group that they used to belong to. I didn't ask to join. They put me in there, and the group was since deleted by Facebook for whatever. So yeah, it's a nickname that was given to me. I didn't pick the name, but I quite like it. I think it is fitting, and of course we all know if you watch Highlander that that French / pretend Scottish guy was just weak. He was a bit of a pussy. Come on, you know that. You know that the Kurgan guy was funny. He was fun. He's a cool dude, and he knew about the Novus Ordo guys. Yeah, you saw his little thing in the church. Yeah, he knew about the Novus Ordo. That's right. He was the cool guy. Film is just bad propaganda.
All right, Kurgan, you have the last word here. By the way, I appreciate you guys doing a little back and forth. I know that wasn't part of the original thing, so I'm glad we got I'll mix it up a little bit. So thank you guys for that. And go ahead, Kurgan.
Well, I've already addressed Jay's points. He keeps hammering the same things as though repeating them makes them valid. It doesn't. The dogmas of the church are interpreted and applied according to canon law. The fact that the curia in Rome is currently completely apostate is a reality, but that absolutely doesn't mean that the remaining valid bishops are invalid in any way. And it's a simple point of canon law that common sense follows. So we're also told, again, I just want to address this point that he keeps going on about, that if the papacy was hijacked, if the Catholic Church was actually hijacked by infiltrators, regardless of their origin, this would somehow put the lie to the promise that the church will always be with us until the return of Jesus. This is demonstrably false in a number of ways. First, the papal encyclical of 1559 I've already referred to, Cum Apostolatus Officium, which makes it clear that apostate popes have existed, will exist, etc. Second, there is no timeline that tells you, oh, well, if you've got an apostate pope or a series of apostate popes for X number of years, then the church is no longer valid. Nowhere does it say that. Third, we're taught in the Bible by Paul that whenever men choose to delve into perversion, iniquity, and stray from the path, God gives them over to their perversions and passions. So we know for a fact that every single human on earth can choose to go down this road. And popes are not exempt from this any more than anybody else. Nowhere does it say that a pope is immune to this way that God has of sometimes dealing with perverts, liars, and other people of the lie. Fourthly, we're told in the Bible that many, in fact most, will in fact be deceived, and that the true path is difficult and narrow. Yet we're also told that the church will remain with us right to the end, at which point eventually Jesus will return, for if he did not, even the elect, that is the most highly faithful servant, would ultimately be deceived by Satan as well. And here we have a perfect parallel of that. The church remains true and visible as long as you take the time to look properly, while the superficial fake Novus Ordo church pretends to be the real church and deceives millions and millions of people. That's why the sedevacantists are starting to wake up a lot more people in the Catholic, nominally Catholic world, and they're becoming a force to be reckoned with. And lastly, fifthly, anyone that actually bothers to be a genuine Catholic and informs himself on Catholic dogma cannot in any logical or reasonable or true way make any kind of argument against the fact that Vatican II was a complete heresy and that anyone who does not reject it loses their office, and as such, the validity of being a cleric within the church without anyone having to say anything. I've written a blog post on my blog, which is gfilotto.com, on the 7th of September of this year. So if you look for that date on the blog, you'll find a logically laid out series of reasons why this works. And it's been uncontroverted and unassailable, including by people like Anne Barnhart and whatever. So if you want to go the details, go there. All we can say is that this has been a long time, but the fact that it's been 61 years is in no way means that there either won't be another pope or that Jesus will return at some point. Again, Jay keeps saying, the end of time, the end of time. You don't know when the end of time. You don't know what that looks like. You don't know whether it operates as, maybe there has to be 150 years of no popes and only a few remnant Catholics lying around in hiding somewhere while they're being persecuted. That is pretty much what almost every Catholic prophecy says it will happen in the end. So again, he's got nothing. He keeps quoting Denzinger. The application of the dogma is very clear, and it's canonic law. That's it. You can't ignore that. Now you can say, oh, but Denzinger says this dogma, that dogma, that dogma. It doesn't matter, because the magisterium of the church has created a document that clearly states how you interpret and how you enact those dogmas. So again, as I said, the man's got nothing. And I actually believe that his reason for doing a 2.5-hour video on supposedly a tiny group of schismatics online,
100,000 tiny,
is because you do say that in your video. But anyway, is because I think he's a bit worried, because there's only some, all it takes is if 10% of nominal Catholics become sedevacantists, that's going to be, a lot of people. That's millions of people that are going to suddenly become Catholic again. So that's my position, and that's it.
All right, fair enough, gentlemen. I think that's it. I appreciate you coming on the Kill Stream and doing this.
Thank you very much.
Oh, no problem, Jay. Thank you as well, man. Merry Christmas to both of you.
Absolutely, yeah. Merry Christmas to you, Ralph. I got to get back to reading my Ludwig Denzinger here.
All right,
a lot of Ludwig Denzinger,
including the Heretic and the Hack.
Got to read a lot of Ludwig Denzinger. That's when you lost the debate, by the way.
Good night.
Good night, gentlemen. All right, that was a little bit off the beaten path for our show, but I think it was fun. I saw some people in the chat. They thought it was a nice departure as well. So I'm glad we did it. It will be up on the podcast feed. Let me see. Flamenco, are you still here? Flamenco's muted. I think he might be playing a game or something. All right. I didn't know he was still here. Okay. Let me read these, though, because people did give me a little bit of money. Let me. Haywood Jablom says, where's the debate? Even if I agree with him, what the fuck? I didn't interrupt during the stream. I just let it go. Spanish Inquisition says, high energy Chagat versus low energy Vox Day. Jack says, Jay started me on classic Bond films. Thank you, big guy. Thank you as well, sir. Haywood Jablomi, just subscribe monthly. Rage Player says, LOL, literal Bible thumpers going on here. Pensive Cowboy says, calm down, Bob, man. Take the trip to Tel Aviv. Jack says, Jay, thoughts on your boomer meme being hijacked? I'm sorry, that didn't get asked, but it was, I just kind of let it go, like I said. Pensive Cowboy says, Nosferatu man fears Catholic dogma. Megu Meme says, why is the Pope selected by man instead of by God? They would be. There's a longer answer to that, but I'm not necessarily equipped to give it to you. Cheeseburger6 says, never been more sure about atheism. Thanks, guys. Pensive Cowboy says, take the flight, and he links this, which I don't know what this is. The Vatican Rag. I don't know that song. But thank you for that. Pensive Cowboy says, Pope Francis wants on. Check the Vatican smokestack. I actually saw that during the show. Started chuckling. And then, here's a clip that Spanish sent in. Let me unmute YouTube so I can play this. There we go. Rage Player says, got a lot better once the blood sport started. Yeah, and I was hoping that would happen. And I wasn't going to push it, but so Kurgan started kind of interrupting during Dyer's segment. I think it was his critique segment. That was the one he interrupted, and I was like, okay, well, gloves are off at this point. I'm just going to let it go. So I'm glad he was the one who initiated that so that I can't be blamed for it, because I wanted that to happen anyway. I want him to fight like that. So, but once he interrupted, I was like, all right, I'm just going to sit back now and just let it go. It's going to be a bare knuckles fight at this point. So I was glad it happened though. So, and I thank Kurgan for doing that. Let's see. Sigma Zero says, Jay Shapiro of a cod. I think chat like that too. Dead Kulak says, Flam succumbed to his bleach. I think that's it. I'll see you guys on Monday. I'm not sure if Ashley Ray Goldenberg is coming on Monday or Wednesday. We'll figure that out next week. The next Blood Sports match is going to be on Thursday, and it's between Vincent James of Red Elephants and Nick Rekieta of Rekieta Law, a longtime guest on the Kill Stream. Nick Rekieta going to be making his Blood Sports debut this Thursday, December the 19th at 9:30 p.m. Eastern. That's going to be a big one. And then, of course, on December 22nd at 2 p.m. Eastern on a Sunday, we have Sticks and Hammer versus E. Michael Jones, pornography debate. So, yeah, I'm ready. Also, I'm very tired, so I'm going to go to sleep. Oh, my God. All right, I'm looking good. Looking forward to both of those. I'm looking good, too, but that's a separate topic. I'm going to find the outro song, and then I'm going to go away. Let's see. Kill Stream outro. I'll see you guys Monday, 9:30 p.m. Eastern. The Kill Stream. Check this out on the podcast if you came in late. I'll probably also be running replays on the channel now that I'm able to do that during the weekend. So join in. Have some fun. It's the Kill Stream. Merry Christmas. Very well. Yes, I'll open the box. Also, it is pretty amazing that we had 1,000 people watching a stream about esoteric Catholic dogma, so thank you.
Secret flags and reports, but we all know who's to blame. Can't afford the retort. Jihadi Jarbo's his name. Now you won't take them round, or all them channels you stride. So just delete your account. I'm sure there's boulders to find. You can't peacefully sunset the kill stream. You never peacefully sunset the kill stream. You won't peacefully sunset the kill stream. You never peacefully sunset the kill stream. You won't peacefully sunset the.
Let's do one more song, an encore.